Today is the first day for the students of the strongest academy in the World Union Academy. Hundreds of the most talented kids on the planet tried to get in this year, and only a few made it. And to open the ceremony, they call the rank #1 admitted swordsman to say a few words. Leon Hart, the golden boy who beat his examiner in seconds. The guy people say already swings a sword at teacher level. So everyone's expecting the classic, "It's an honor to be here" speech. But Blondie flips the script and says one person in this crowd doesn't deserve to wear the uniform. Because there's a student here who didn't earn his spot like everyone else. A guy who couldn't even beat his examiner, but somehow still got accepted. Personally picked by a certain thick red-haired teacher through a loophole called the Divine Eye Admission, where a VIP can instantly admit someone. In Blondie's eyes, that's a backdoor student, and he starts shouting for this mystery guy to stand up and hand over his uniform right there. Problem is, the Academy only identifies applicants by numbers, so nobody knows who he's talking about, except the guy himself. Our boy Gray is sitting in that crowd sweating like he's dating Blondie's sister. That's when Ariel, the teacher in question, decides she's heard enough. She teleports directly in front of Leonhardt and asks him if he honestly thinks he's stronger than the student she picked. Bro froze for a second, but with the entire Academy watching, his ego wasn't letting him back down, so he says of course he is. He ranked first for a reason. So she offers him a bet. Both of them get the same target to hunt. Whoever fails loses. If her mystery student loses, every Divine Eye student gets expelled and she quits her job on the spot. If Leonhardt loses, he becomes her errand boy and does whatever she says. And the monster she picks? An ogre general. A disaster-level creature that commands hundreds of ogres at once, something not even experienced warriors fight alone. Blondie says that's impossible for a student, so she gives them a full year. And since that still sounds insane, she sweetens the deal. If nobody kills one before the deadline, Leonhardt wins automatically. So in his head, this is free. He signs the contract thinking he just got handed the safest victory of his life. What this idiot doesn't know is that Gray killed an ogre general weeks ago, before school even started. The bet was over before Blondie opened his mouth. My boy looks across the crowd, catches Ariel giving him a tiny signal to stay quiet. Yes, mommy, I'm staying very quiet if you ask. But Blondie's humiliation arc was just getting started. Because in the first magic class, the teacher notices Gray looking bored and pulls him to the front to demonstrate the most basic spell in existence, the Ether Bullet. And since he heard Gray is the famous Divine Eye student, he exposes him to everyone and gets the genius idea to make it a friendly duel against Leonhardt, who now knows he's the special admission dude and is fuming to beat him. The whole class turns around. Blondie is staring at Gray like Christmas came early. He finally found the backdoor student, and now he gets to put him in his place in front of everyone. It was a 1v1 with the simplest of the spells, so it was safe. Both of them charge up. But when they shot, our main character showed he truly had the biggest ball in that room. Blondie's attack got completely dwarfed, both of them just staring at this thing Gray created. The teacher had to sprint to throw up a barrier and save Blondie's ass, and the sphere still cracked straight through it, blew up half the classroom, rattled the students in the back rows, and sent the Academy's #1 swordsman flying like a ragdoll. Bro came to class to bully the new kid and almost left as a missing person report. When the smoke clears, the teacher admits that without his barrier, Blondie would be dead. Gray is the most confused person in the room, because as far as he knows, he has zero talent for magic. But now the teacher is asking himself, who is this guy? For that, we gotta see his past life. See, Gray used to be a foot soldier. 15 years in the future, a mysterious being called the Liquidator showed up out of nowhere and erased an entire continent. No warning, no demands, nothing. So humanity gathered the strongest people alive into one final force. Bella, a sage whose magic rivals an entire military division. Jacob, a divine archer who drops dragons with one shot. Yami, a swordswoman so broken that calling her human feels disrespectful. And then there was Gray, support unit. His whole job was creating openings, following orders, and dying before someone important had to. On the day of the final battle, he's charging through a storm of attacks thinking the moment finally came. Beat this thing, and everyone's free. Then a beam punches straight through his chest, a hole where his heart used to be. He drops to his knees, and dying isn't even the worst part. Around him there's hundreds of bodies. People who trained their whole lives, abandoned their families, followed the greatest heroes into the last battle, and they still died changing nothing. At least the real heroes are still fighting. Yami actually reaches the Liquidator and cuts him. First time in history the thing that erased a continent is bleeding. But when the Liquidator sees his own blood, 2 beams of light, Yami and every legend humanity had left, erased in seconds. Gray closes his eyes and waits for a death that never comes. His pain starts fading, the hole in his chest starts closing on its own, and a voice inside his head says it finally found him. And out of nowhere he's transported into an endless cosmos. He thinks he's in the afterlife until he turns around and finds a mysterious horned being who tells him he's not only still alive, but his wounds have been completely healed. The craziest part is that when Gray asks if he saved him, the being says he did nothing. Gray healed himself with his own power. Still, he can't really explain it, because even he doesn't know the true limit of Gray's abilities. What he can say is this: if Gray learns to control that power, he could become far stronger than the Liquidator. Even so, he's still not sure whether Gray really has a chance to defeat him, but he wants that bastard dead too, so he'll help. Then something shocking happens. he pierces Gray's chest again and tells him to go, because he's lending him part of his power. A moment later, the main character wakes up again in the middle of the battlefield, where he notices his sword is wrapped in some kind of dark energy. He thinks it belongs to the entity, but the being quickly says no, his power can't be seen. That dark energy is Gray's own. So without hesitating for even a second, Gray leaps at the liquidator and slices a deep cut across his chest. The enemy actually steps back, shocked that someone still remains who's worth fighting. Gray is thrilled to see he can finally hurt him, so he keeps pressing the attack and even realizes that in some ways he's stronger than the enemy he used to fear so much. The liquidator immediately warns him not to underestimate him, then fires off a brutal attack that cuts the main character in half, sending blood everywhere. Certain he's won, he turns his back and even congratulates Gray for forcing him to use all his power. But then, along with the blood, that strange black energy starts pouring out of Gray's lifeless body, until it forms a humanoid shape made of pure darkness, like something from a nightmare. By now, even the liquidator can't believe what he's seeing, and he instantly creates a powerful barrier around himself. He can see the figure turn back into the main character, but he still can't understand how something like that could be human. Gray just stares at him, then grabs his sword and unleashes an attack so strong that the impact against the liquidator's shield sends out a massive shockwave of energy. But the real surprise comes a few seconds later, when the shield shatters completely, and the blade pushes into the enemy's own chest. Blood pours out, and once again he asks if Gray is human. Gray answers that he's wondering the same thing, and of course the liquidator still can't understand how he's alive. Gray admits the gap between them has already started to close, and this is only the beginning. The enemy thinks he can just crush him again and again until he dies, but Gray doesn't make it easy and quickly lands the first blow. This cut is even deeper than the last, leaving the liquidator bleeding and screaming in pain. But he has tricks of his own and activates an ability that can control the space around both of them. In an instant, night falls, the moon shines above, and he has only one thing to say: time's up. The thing is, Gray isn't about to be scared by something that simple. He attacks, aiming to cut off the enemy's head, only to realize every inch of the liquidator's body is covered by an invisible shield. In a calm, confident tone, the enemy makes it clear this is pointless. In that space, nothing can hurt him. So he tells Gray to stop trying and instead focus on the stars. That sounds stupid at first, until Gray looks up and suddenly falls into a trance. But that's only the start of the trap. What looked like a distant star suddenly drops toward him at full speed and crashes down, unleashing a violent blast. When the dust clears, there's a giant crater, and no sign of the main character. The liquidator says Gray won't survive or come back if he's turned to dust. But that becomes his biggest mistake, because the dust itself starts gathering into a huge magic circle. Then a voice says that maybe the best thing to do is use all that leftover energy from the attack to send him back. And of course that voice belongs to the same deity as before. The liquidator recognizes him as Kronos, but Kronos ignores him and keeps his focus on Gray. He says he'll use his power to send him straight into the past, and just like that, without the liquidator being able to do anything to stop it, the time travel spell activates, and Gray is given a mission more important than his own life, the fate of the world. Then in the blink of an eye, the main character opens his eyes and realizes he's no longer on that terrible battlefield, but on a peaceful hill just outside Renato, his hometown, where he lived until it was completely destroyed, 15 years later. That means what he heard in his final moments wasn't a hallucination or some kind of joke. He really fought the liquidator one-on-one, and he really was sent to the past. Luckily, he notices a wound on the middle of his arm, which tells him he's gone back to the time when he was bullied by a guy named Velder. Velder used to torment Manuel, and just thinking about facing him again makes Gray's body shake. He feels so weak that he almost convinces himself the whole battle with the destroyer was just a dream, and that his only goal now should be getting stronger to survive. But on the way back home, that bastard cuts him off and says he's been looking for him, then tosses him a sword so they can have a training match. Of course, Gray knows Velder is dead serious, and even though he tries to refuse, saying his injury still hasn't fully healed, Velder keeps pushing until he charges at the main character himself with a sword in hand, saying that if Gray doesn't want to use a weapon, then he can take the hits with his bare hands. At that moment, Gray remembers a military doctor once told him his soul would never fully recover because of an injury he suffered when he was younger. So maybe this was where his life as a loser began, and if that's true, maybe he has a chance to change it. So he starts dodging Velder's attacks. Then he's shocked to realize how slow Velder is and how basic his moves are. At first, Gray wonders if Velder was always this weak, but then he understands that what changed is something else. He's the one who got faster. Of course, everyone else notices it and stares in disbelief as he picks up the sword. Gray realizes then that it wasn't a dream. He really did go back in time, not with the body or the powers he used to have, but with the memories of every battle he's fought. And that's worth more than any talent. It becomes even clearer when one single move with that sword is enough to bring down Velder. For a moment, Gray wonders if he should really fight someone so clearly weaker than him. But that doubt doesn't last long because he remembers all the years that bastard tormented him. So he not only forces him to drop his sword, but takes advantage of the fact that he's disarmed to attack him directly, the same way Velder had planned to beat him while he was helpless. And he's not doing it just to scare him, because with a single slash he cuts open Velder's chest, leaving him frozen in pain. Velder never expected Gray to actually strike back, But he's not the only one shocked, because that sword is supposed to be blunt, which means if it had been fully sharpened, Gray really could have killed him. For a moment, Gray wonders if he should keep going, until he remembers that bastard had already earned it. He deserves it, so Gray goes in again and knocks out his teeth with one hit. Then he tells him not to worry about him because he was the one who wanted to fight like this. Panicking, the guy yells for his friends to stop standing around and jump Gray. One of them hesitates, but they still think there's no way he can beat them when they outnumber him like this. So even when Gray warns them not to try it, those idiots rush him, and the next thing all four of them are kneeling in front of him. It's so pathetic that Gray wonders how he ever spent so long being scared of losers like them. What he really wants to know now is where they learned to fight. That's when he finds out they used to train at Saria's Grima dojo, but quit, because they thought they were already strong enough. At first that makes the dojo sound like a rat nest, but it could still help him, so since entry needs a recommendation, he tells them to introduce him to the master. Velder tries to refuse, but Gray suggests they keep going with their little practice match. That shuts him up fast, and the idiot leads him there, asking why he suddenly cares so much about the dojo. Gray says it's the only way he can get into the academy, and one of them innocently says he's already strong enough and doesn't need that place. But Gray can only think about how not even the strongest warriors in the world could beat the Liquidator, so this is no time to get comfortable. He doesn't even know how strong he needs to become, and the only thing he knows for sure is that even the dark power that covered his body wasn't enough, at least not fully. Still, there were moments when, while controlling it, he could feel real power in his hands. And that only happened when he tried to copy the Grimmy technique, so he can't help wondering if the battle would have ended differently if he'd reached the level of someone like Kronos, may have sent him back for exactly that. With that in mind, they arrive at the dojo, where the master, a blue-eyed woman named Saria, personally steps in to beat down the bullies for trying to use their skills against a civilian, then throws them out. She says trash like them never even deserved to be part of her dojo. But she doesn't stop there. The woman is so honorable that she quickly kneels before Gray and says that, as an apology, she wants to write him a recommendation letter to make sure he gets into the academy. The problem is, first she needs to test his ability. So she faces him, and she's genuinely surprised when Gray charges at her with a sharp, practical technique that's far too polished for someone his age. That's when it becomes obvious why Velder and the others never stood a chance against him. Even if his style is mostly self-taught, it has the shape of a true rough diamond. That excites her, and even though she wants to keep the match going, it's time to end the fight. So she starts pressing much harder, planning to disarm him with a couple of quick thrusts. The strange part is that even after raising the intensity by several levels, Gray keeps answering solidly and matching her pace, even as she pushes harder and harder, until even Zarya realizes she's using her full power. It's gone from a test to a real struggle, just to keep him from surpassing her. At that point, she truly starts to feel afraid of him. And then Gray throws out a direct wild strike that Zarya barely manages to dodge. She admits that happened because of the fear she felt earlier. She tells herself she wasn't being overwhelmed. Her instincts were just speaking, and now she thinks she's found an opening and can beat him. Certain she can finish the fight, she attacks, only to realize she was completely wrong because out of nowhere the sword she was supposed to use to win suddenly breaks. Gray realizes it was a small release of the same power that awakened in his fight with the Liquidator. In other words, he hasn't lost it completely. But there's a problem. Without warning, his body starts shaking and he drops to his knees because it can't keep up at all. He has to struggle just to stand again, which makes him realize he needs to use that power very carefully. He wonders if he should tell Zarya, but quickly throws that idea away, because he doubts she'd believe him. So in the end, all he says is that he got carried away a little. But the woman isn't stupid. She knows it's impossible to slice clean through a wooden sword with another wooden sword that isn't even sharp, and even though she's sure he noticed that too, she decides to respect his choice and stay quiet about it. What she does make clear is that she has confirmed his talent, and she can give him a recommendation to enter the best school in the entire kingdom, the Royal Fencing Academy. The catch is that she doesn't recommend he go there because he isn't suited for that place. Right away, Gray thinks he understands. He lacks strength and still has a long way to go. But Zarya cuts in and says she's not finished. The place he should go is the Academy of Eskrima. Not the best in the kingdom, but the best in the whole world, and Gray knows it well. He knows that's where the great heroes came from, so the idea sounds impossible. Zarya says it is impossible in his current condition because during the test she gave him, she noticed his sword skill is far beyond his physical condition. The way he is now, he won't pass the entrance exam. Gray immediately knows she's right, since that place is filled with true superhumans, but Zarya says she's not telling him this to make him give up. There are still 9 months left before the entrance exam, and even if that's not much time, she's willing to train him so he can make it. Still, he has to be ready to suffer. Gray accepts and asks her to turn him into a completely different person over the next few months. Zarya says that's the right answer before telling him to get ready, because his hell starts now. Then we get a small time skip of 8 full months, and she takes the training very seriously. But just as the pain is guaranteed, so are the results, because his body changes a lot and his muscles grow noticeably. Eventually, Zarya admits she has nothing left to teach him, so he can go. Worried, Gray says they still have a month left to polish anything that needs work, but she insists the best thing he can do now is go to the exam site and get used to the area. So she gives him a bag of money, enough for travel and food. Even with her kindness, Gray thinks leaving a whole month early is still strange, almost like she's trying to send him away from the village. She tells him he's overthinking it until he reveals that he heard rumors about an ogre nest found near the village. Right away, Zarya tries to play dumb, but even though she says guards from the capital will come deal with it, the worry on her face gives her away, and Gray can see the lie instantly. Besides, he already knows what will happen. Help will never come, and just before the village is destroyed, she'll die trying to fight the strongest ogre. Still, he stops pushing and pretends to accept Zarya's decision. She smiles in relief, wishing him luck on the exam. But what comes next is nothing like the peace she promised. Because weeks later, she's moving through the forest toward the nest, when a voice above her asks where she thinks she's going. Of course, it's Gray, who has been following her in silence because he refuses to let history repeat itself. Zarya immediately asks what he's doing there, but Gray says that question should be for her since she was the one who said the capital would handle the ogres. She explains they couldn't come because of more urgent matters, so she decided to take care of the threat herself. Confidently, she tells him not to worry, because even if the boss is elite level and the nest holds around 50 monsters, it's still nothing she can handle. Technically, she's right, and Gray knows she can deal with that much. What she isn't considering is that the ogre's real strength lies in its intelligence. So even if Gray never learned exactly how they beat Zarya in the other timeline, he's sure she won't make it out alive. That's why he asks her to please let him come with her. As an excuse, he says it'll be the best way to gain real experience, and even asks if she really thinks he'd just be a burden. She answers that she would never think that, because she understood long ago that he's stronger than she is. The problem is that monster nests like this are too unpredictable and too dangerous for someone with so little experience, no matter how strong he is. But Gray is so desperate that he draws his sword and threatens to knock her out right there so he can move ahead and face the boss alone. That finally makes Zarya give in, and she tells him he can join the mission on one condition. He has to promise her one thing. No matter what happens, he must get out of there alive, even if that means leaving her behind. Gray agrees, but only if she makes the same promise. With that settled, the two move forward carefully until they reach the ogre's den. There they notice the area has only one way in and out, which means either side would have a hard time escaping. That's why Gray warns that they need to be very careful. He says the bastards made a smart choice, but Zarya is already one step ahead and starts studying the area. It looks like the boss is staying inside his tent, so they need to quietly cut down the numbers first, before the boss notices them. So the best plan is to split up and fight separately. So they separate and use the element of surprise to start taking down enemy after enemy. It doesn't take long for the ogres to realize what's happening and start fighting back with the same force, but the advantage is still on their side, and within seconds they've wiped out most of the enemies. In the middle of the chaos, Zarya admits he's doing pretty well. She asks if this is really his first real battlefield, but Gray dodges the question and warns her to stay sharp. They've only just started. He doesn't say it out loud, but something feels off. For some reason, the enemies are weaker than he ever expected. So if they really manage to beat Zarya in the other timeline, then the only answer is that the boss inside that tent is stronger than expected. And he's right, because out of nowhere he feels eyes staring at him from inside the tent. Every instinct in his body goes on alert, to the point that Voltaire yells at Zarya that she has to run. Of course, she doesn't understand the sudden change. But when Gray shouts at her not to ask questions and just run, she moves, sprinting for her life. But it's already too late. At that exact moment, the boss lands right next to them, and they confirm that yes, it's an elite-class ogre, and it's saying what an honor it is that they came to it. The real problem starts when Gray says that isn't the boss. Then the ogre lets out a loud warning cry followed by hundreds of others, bringing in a second wave of enemies just as strong as it is. In other words, that elite ogre isn't the boss. It's just one soldier among hundreds of ogres led by something even stronger, and in the distance they finally see an ogre general. That's a monster they definitely can't handle alone, so Zarya insists they need to focus on breaking through and escaping before things get even worse. But even though she lands a clean strike on the first enemy, the real nightmare begins when it regenerates like nothing happened. In the middle of it all, Gray explains that an ogre general's roar can boost both the strength and healing of its allies, so they'll need another plan. Then, out of nowhere, the protagonist tells her to cover his back. She doesn't need to do anything special, just buy him a little time while he takes down that bastard. And that's when the real battle starts, because to reach the general, they first have to break through a crowd of elite ogres so strong that just one clash of weapons shatters the protagonist's sword into pieces. The confidence he had starts fading fast. Even though he pulls out his spare sword, he knows it's only a matter of time before that one breaks too. Luckily, Zarya notices, and knowing two swords are better than one, throws him her spare, hoping it'll help him last a little longer. The problem is, he'll have to use it very carefully. So Gray focuses on moving smartly, making every swing hit as many enemies as possible. At first it works, but it doesn't take long before the ogres focus on him and start surrounding him from every side. And if that wasn't enough, the ogre general lets out another powerful roar, and to his surprise it makes them even stronger, to the point that monsters who are already dangerous enter a kind of blood-crazed frenzy as they charge ahead with only one target in mind, the protagonist. By then it's obvious the general has seen through his plan, but it's too early to give up, so Gray pushes harder, switching to a different strategy and trying to avoid them at all costs. Sadly, the ogres are still one step ahead, because the moment they notice he's trying to slip past, the bastards dive at his back, tackling him, pinning him down, and basically doing anything they can to wear him out as much as possible before he reaches their leader. In one of those moments, an ogre throws a blow so strong that Gray has no choice but to block with his sword, and it instantly shatters into pieces. At the same time, he takes a good part of the impact, and now he has only one sword left. He can't help thinking about his life before going back in time. All those experiences that taught him that in a situation like this, he can't win. He's so sure of it that he yells at Zarya to run and use the chance to escape while the enemies are focused on him. What he doesn't count on is that the woman would never do that. Gray asks if she really plans to throw her life away in a pointless sacrifice. Sadly, Zarya's answer is even worse than he expected. It's not that she doesn't want to run, she can't. Her leg is injured, and she can't run anymore. No matter how he looks at it, they're out of options. The protagonist can't help thinking about how ironic the whole situation is. He thought he traveled through time to defeat the Liquidator, but when his last sword is destroyed, it's obvious everything is going to end even sooner than in the other timeline. But that's when he remembers he's not done yet. If the only other choice is to die for nothing, then it's better to risk it by activating that strange power from before. The last time he used it for just a few seconds, it nearly killed him, but his body has changed a lot since then, so he tries to focus on the feeling he had when it activated, closes his eyes, and bets everything on the next second. Luckily, the effect is instant, because something awakens inside him, and in the blink of an eye, his sword is covered in dark energy, so much that a single swing is enough to cut down every enemy around him. The look on Zarya's face turns to confusion, and he just gives her a smile, before promising that from now on, everything will be fine. That starts the hunt, because the general is so shocked that the effect of its skill on the others completely breaks. The white-haired boy uses that chance to wipe out the enemy that had been giving him so much trouble. After a while, the two of them are left standing over the bodies, including the generals, and the protagonist apologizes to Zarya for breaking her sword. Of course, she couldn't care less now, since he literally just saved her life. But right when she tries to ask where that power came from, Gray collapses to the ground, completely drained, or at least that's how it looks at first. On his side, the protagonist wakes up in the middle of nowhere, a completely black space where there's nothing except a sealed door, and from it waves of dark energy slowly begin to leak out, the same power he felt before. That's why he figures that if he opens it, he'll gain complete control over that ability. It sounds tempting, until he unconsciously steps forward and his body is hit by a murderous pressure that freezes him on the spot. Of course, he doesn't hesitate to step back, because he's sure that if he opens the door as he is now, he'll die. And the creepiest part is that the moment he thinks that, an outside voice says he made the right choice. Thankfully, right then he wakes up in the village infirmary, where Zarya has been waiting for him. To him, it felt like he was gone for only a few seconds, but in reality, he's been unconscious for 5 whole days and she admits she thought he had died. Calmly, Gray says he just pushed himself a little too far, but the white-haired girl doubts that's enough to describe the crazy thing he did. Everything he pulled off with just a few sword swings. Still, what matters now is that he's okay, so she asks if he can stand up, and that simple idea is shut down right away, when Gray realizes he can't even gather enough strength to move his right arm. And strangely, that's not even the weirdest part, because he notices a large black stain spreading under the bandage. Zarya can't even see it, and the only obvious thing is that his arms are a mess, but he can't feel it because they gave him a magic potion. And that's when everything else stops mattering, because Gray knows those are insanely expensive and is almost too shocked to speak. Then she tells him it was a gift from the village chief for saving everyone. At first, the protagonist doesn't get what she means, but then the chief walks into the infirmary and makes it clear that this is the least he could do. Gray kept the whole place and all its people from being burned to ashes. The protagonist immediately says he's exaggerating, but the man insists he's serious. More than anyone, Gray should know that an ogre general isn't something fighters from a tiny village in the middle of nowhere could defeat. And that's when he reminds himself that in the other timeline, that's exactly what happened. If he hadn't stepped in, Zarya, the chief, and everyone there would have died within hours. The problem now is that between the battles, the weeks that passed since he told Zarya he was leaving, and the time he spent unconscious, there are only 2 days left before the World Union Academy entrance exam. Normally it's a 3-day trip, but if he leaves on horseback right now, he might still make it in time. So he asked the chief to lend him one, promising to pay him back when he returns. But the man already knew he'd ask, so he prepared the best horse in the whole village ahead of time. Zarya adds that if he hadn't woken up, she was planning to carry him there herself. With that settled, Gray gets ready to leave. He gets ready to leave, but the biggest surprise comes when he opens the door to the clinic and finds the whole village waiting for him, ready to send him off with signs, cheers, words of thanks, and even a bag of money they collected to help cover his academy costs. Without hesitation, Gray thanks them all, and even though he admits the pressure to pass feels heavier than ever, Zarya tells him not to worry. She knows better than anyone that no other applicant can say they beat an ogre general. Sure, with his right arm like that, he won't be able to shine the way he should, but Gray insists his left arm will be enough, and he won't even need that strange power from before. The examiners aren't blind, and there's no way they'll overlook someone as gifted as him. No matter what, he's going to pass. With that promise, Gray sets off, thinking that if he managed to save a village that was supposed to be destroyed, then the future really can be changed. From there, we jump straight to the start of the entrance exam, where the announcer says all examiners must stay inside the central arena until the process is over. What shocks Gray is the number of people there. Hundreds of applicants, even though usually only around 20 get picked each year. Some even say there have been years when only one person made it. Then Ariel steps forward as the head evaluator and, with a single snap of her fingers, hands out a ticket to every applicant with their number on it, the only information they need. The Academy doesn't care about gender, age, nationality, bloodline, or money. None of that matters here. The only thing being tested is talent. Ariel even says some people have gotten in using fake names, but what catches Gray off guard is that even though he left his sword at the inn, they still knew exactly what his specialty was. As if she read his thoughts, Ariel explains she assigned their courses based on how they look. And from the way she looks at them, she clearly has some kind of skill backing that up. If she got anyone wrong, they're free to raise their hand. Even though everyone thinks that's insane and assumes she must have researched them beforehand, not a single person raises a hand. After that, she announces the tickets also show one more thing: the day and time of each evaluation. Gray's turn is scheduled for the next day at 11 in the morning, which is a problem because part of him hoped his arm would have more time to heal. But Ariel makes it clear there will be no changes, and anyone who arrives even a few minutes late will be disqualified. So he moves straight to the next day, when Gray realizes his arm hasn't healed at all. That means he'll have to manage with only his offhand. At first, that makes him hesitate, but when there's just one person left before his turn, he keeps telling himself he still has a chance, and the best thing he can do is study the sword examiner. He'll be fighting. If this test is a real battle against one of the Academy's strongest swordsmen, then looks mean nothing. The examiner tells another candidate he can take the first strike, and even though the guy throws a blow strong enough to crack the ground, the examiner dodges it and effortlessly places his sword against the candidate's chest, showing the match is basically over. But the guy still refuses to quit and attacks again, only for the examiner to block his huge blade with one that's about half the size, and disarm him in a matter of seconds. Just like that, the exam ends. Watching from his spot, Gray realizes he's in trouble, so when his turn comes, he steps forward with one thought in his head. How is he supposed to beat someone who just disarmed a giant that easily? Once again, the examiner offers the first move, and Gray goes in, ready to use one of Zaria's best lessons from training. A sword isn't swung with just the arms, but with the whole body. So even injured, he can drive power through the rest of his muscles. That lets him throw a pretty solid strike. Of course, it's still nowhere near his normal attacks, but it's enough to make the instructor answer right away. And to Gray's surprise, he can see the sword moving almost slowly. Not because the man is weak, but because compared to Zaria's speed and skill, he doesn't even come close. That instantly boosts Gray's confidence, and within seconds he starts pushing forward with quick, sharp movements that force the examiner back, proving Zaria was right all along. He really might pass. Still, it isn't easy. As the fight goes on, Gray realizes that even if he's already figured out the examiner's sword style, the man is still very strong, and there's no way Gray can break through using only his left arm. On top of that, the examiner is feeling the pressure too, and his attacks are getting rougher and rougher, so Gray decides to risk everything with a new plan. He gives up the advantage for a couple of seconds, just long enough to make the examiner think his guard is broken and go for a clean, wide, all-in finishing blow. In the end, the examiner is the one who opens himself up, and Gray uses that moment to slip behind him and thrust forward. A strike that would have won him the match if just millimeters from landing someone hadn't shouted stop, making Gray freeze at once. He looks around confused because the fight had just gotten good. Then another judge announces that time is up, and since that's how it ended, the only conclusion they can make is that it's a draw. Of course, Gray assumes the worst. In his mind, the only way to pass was to beat the evaluator. So he leaves the arena feeling crushed, repeating to himself that at least he gave it everything he had, already thinking he'll have to take the exam again next year. He walks away convinced he'll do much better once his arm fully heals. After that, a whole week passes until all the evaluators gather to talk about the applicants and compare notes. In general, they're completely worn out because the exam's golden rule is to judge each person one by one, then discuss every single case the same way. They start with the sword course applicants, where the clear winners are the ones who actually beat the evaluator. But they also consider strategy and how long each person lasted during the 15-minute limit. The problem is, one evaluator insists that this time only the people who beat the examiner should pass, plus maybe a few rare exceptions, and sadly, Gray isn't one of them. In fact, no one even says anything special about his performance. It seems like that's the end of it, until someone asks what they'll do about candidate number 513. Of course, that's Gray's number, but the surprise is that the one who brings him up is Ariel herself, insisting he has real potential, even if the others don't agree. They argue that even if it looked like he was about to win, the fact that he relied on cheap tricks says a lot, and none of it is good. They do admit his technique was solid, but say he lacks strength and spent most of the test getting overpowered, which to them means he's useless. That only makes Ariel laugh to herself. With so many people watching, she finds it ridiculous that none of them noticed that one small detail. But we don't get to hear the rest of the argument, because we jump straight to the next day, when they announce that only 6 people have been accepted into the sword course. Candidate number 5, number 217, 432, 615, 753, and 925. Even though Gray still waits to hear his name, they make it clear that's all of them, and only those 6 candidates have the right to cross the bridge and finish the enrollment process. Everyone else must leave, except for one more, the one personally chosen by the Divine Eye, candidate number 513. Within seconds, Gray's ticket bursts into bright blue fire, and everyone stares at him with curiosity, admiration, and anger, because a special Divine Eye admission isn't something just anyone gets. Gray has no idea what that even means, but he hears some people whisper that it's just how spoiled idiots sneak in through the back door. That makes even less sense to him, because he literally has no connections at all. He even wonders if Saria might know someone, until an old man cuts in and tells them to shut up because Divine Eye admission is an honorable category that has produced heroes for hundreds of years. They fire back that lately it's lost all prestige, since it's only been used to admit useless people like Jacob, Bella, and Yami, 3 of the Academy's biggest failures. What they don't know is that Gray knows those names very well. Even if people see them as weak right now, they'll become part of the main force against the Liquidator. Either way, the point is simple: he got in. From there, we move straight to the entrance ceremony, where Gray and the other chosen students receive their documents and are called to the plaza in front of the main office. The strange part is that when they arrive, there's nothing there, and they start wondering if they came to the wrong place. Then an assistant shows up to explain that there's been a small delay with the setup because of a mix-up. Since the place is completely empty, they figure it will take a long time, but then he tells them to step back so they can begin the setup, and in an instant the ground lights up with dozens of magic circles that spread out in a brilliant glow and start forming a small coliseum. With a smile, he tells them to sit wherever they want. The students head over completely amazed because that wasn't normal magic, it was teleportation used on huge objects. Even Gray, who's seen plenty of wild things, thinks this is an insanely flashy way to use that spell. That only makes him even more excited since it shows just how much power the World Union Academy has. Still, a boy up front notices something Gray missed. There are way too many seats for just 30 accepted students. His friend explains why. The Academy brings together the best students from all over the world, but what does that have to do with anything? To get it, he needs to look up, because dragons and airships are all arriving at the same place at once. Once again, the guy has no idea what he's looking at, but the protagonist recognizes them right away. Strato Queen magic aircraft, the biggest and most expensive in the world. So it's crazy to think they're casually using them just to bring in the rest of the students. The ceremony isn't only for the new ones, the seats are also for upperclassmen. Once everyone is gathered, the assistant says they can finally begin the ceremony. It turns out to be painfully boring, because the director gives a speech so dull that Gray is almost falling asleep, until they start introducing the top students from each year. That's when a blonde boy near the protagonist stands up, Leonhardt Apias. He's the strongest swordsman in the group, and during the entrance exam, he beat the examiner in seconds. Rumor says he's as skilled with a sword as some of the teachers, so of course he catches Gray's attention. Even more when he asks the teachers if he can speak freely, and they say yes, not expecting Leonhardt to start complaining about the academy. He says it's an honor to be admitted with everyone else, all that stuff, but then insists that one person there doesn't deserve to be here. To make it perfectly clear, he turns to Ariel, the Divine Eye, and asks if she knows who he means. Ariel seems surprised. She answers that everyone here passed strict tests, so even if not all of them are as strong as him, they still earn their place. Then she flat out asks what the hell he's talking about. Leonhardt says everyone deserves to be here except the guy who got in through the back door with that so-called special Divine Eye admission, and he doesn't stop there. Leonhardt starts shouting for that student to show himself and hand over his uniform, obviously talking about the protagonist. Luckily, because everyone was chosen only by numbers, no one knows what he looks like. Ariel tries to change the subject, but Leonhardt keeps going until she suddenly teleports right in front of him, and in a pretty creepy way asks if he really thinks he's stronger than that other student. At first, Leonhardt gets so nervous he can't even answer, but then he steadies himself and says of course he is. He ranked first for a reason. That's when things finally get interesting, because Ariel suggests a bet. 2 things will be on the line. First, the other boy's admission, and also her own job. The protagonist freezes, since he definitely never agreed to anything like that. Leonhardt asks if they're really going to make him fight, but Ariel says no. If the other boy got serious, Leonhardt would die, and as a teacher she won't risk a student's life. That instantly makes things tense. Leonhardt asks if that's supposed to be an insult, but the redhead makes it clear she means every word. So instead they'll compete by fighting monsters. That way it's safer and fairer. And Ariel even hints that Leonhardt is better at fighting monsters than humans. What exactly she means by that we don't know. Still, Leonhardt accepts, and Ariel starts laying out the rules. Basically, each of them has to kill the monster she names as the target. Every round, the target monster gets stronger, and whoever fails to kill theirs loses. If the protagonist loses, Ariel will quit her teaching job, and every special admission student will be expelled. But if Leonhardt loses, he'll have to do whatever she says. Before agreeing, he wants to know what kind of monsters they'll face, so he doesn't walk into a trap. And this is where things get weird, because Ariel acts like she's thinking, then asks how he'd feel about fighting an ogre general. That's way too specific to be random, so the protagonist starts wondering if she knows more than she lets on. Of course, Leonhardt says that isn't a monster. A student can beat alone. Ariel says fine, it can be a long-term bet. They'll have until the end of the year to defeat the creature, or they lose anyway. Even then, the blonde still thinks it's impossible because it's a disaster-level monster. There's no way he could beat something like that with only a year of training. He starts thinking Ariel picked an unbeatable monster just so the bet would end in a draw. But then Ariel adds one more condition. If it ends in a tie, he wins. So whether he beats the monster or not, he'll be safe. But if the protagonist fails to defeat it, Ariel and all the special students will be expelled. The problem is, she sounds so sure of herself that Leonhardt can't help feeling there's still some trick behind it. So Ariel hands him a magic contract she just wrote with all the details. Now it's up to him whether he signs it or not. The surprising part is that Leonhardt accepts anyway, asking if she really believes that boy can win. In the end, she says nothing and just sits down. That only convinces everyone she's lost her mind and is using this bet as some crazy way to retire. As for the protagonist, he's more nervous than ever until he remembers the exact words she used and starts wondering if that one-year deadline also includes the ogre general he already killed weeks ago. He gets his answer when Ariel looks at him and makes a small hand sign telling him to keep quiet, basically confirming this was a bet he already won. After that, we jump straight to the first class on the basics of magic, where the teacher starts with the simplest part. Inside every person's body, there's an invisible energy called aether. By using the right magic circles to control it, people can do amazing things. During all that talk, the protagonist is glad most of this is stuff he already learned in his past life's training. That means his real problem is Leonhardt, because they ended up in all the same classes. So now the goal is keeping it secret that he's the special student Leonhardt hates so much. The problem is, if he wants to stay unnoticed, he's in trouble. The teacher notices he looks bored, and without any filter, tells him to come up front and show the class how to use basic magic. The protagonist admits he didn't think knowing magic was required since this is a sword course, but the teacher explains they still need the basics so they can work together with mages. That reminds him it's the same thing they told him back at the camp, so he takes a chance and asks if the spell they're learning is Aether Bullet. To his surprise, he's right, but he can't celebrate yet because once the teacher sees he knows the spell, he suggests a duel between him and none other than Leonhardt, who apparently was basically born using it. The protagonist asks if it's really smart to pit him against a beginner. Leonhardt clearly isn't dying from humility, but the teacher says it's fine because the spell isn't lethal, and Gray is the Divine Eye special admission student, so he's no weakling. Right away, everyone turns to look at him. It's obvious the old bastard did that on purpose, because Leonhardt glares at him like he wants to kill him, fully ready to put him in his place. And Gray? He's had better days. He steps down until he's face to face with Leonhardt, thinking he could end up badly hurt if he doesn't block in time. When he sees the blonde is going all out, he decides to do the same and forms a magic sphere so huge that both he and Leonhardt just stare at it. One look is enough to tell that this is not a harmless Aether Bullet. Leonhardt is so terrified he doesn't even react fast enough to run. Luckily, the teacher does, casting a spell to stop the sphere before the fight turns tragic. Or at least that's how it seemed, because Gray's shot is so strong it cracks the teacher's spell and sets off a huge explosion that reaches even the students in the back rows and blasts Leonhardt several meters away. The good news is everyone survives, but the teacher admits that if he hadn't softened the impact, the blonde would be dead. What shocks him most is that he's never seen an Aether Bullet that big. That's why he turns to the protagonist and asks what he just did. The boy is just as confused, since he didn't even use that strange energy from before, at least not on purpose. It's more like the Aether Bullet he learned during the war is different from the one they teach at the academy. But the teacher makes it clear that it is an Aether Bullet. The only difference is the quality of the spell. He doesn't seem to have used normal Aether, but super compressed Aether. Of course, no one in the room had ever heard of that, so the teacher explains it's a level of power even professors struggle to produce, and even he can use it, only nowhere near that level. Right away, the students start wondering if that's why he was admitted through the Divine Eye. Even so, the protagonist still has doubts, because he clearly remembers that this was exactly the kind of spell they taught in the war, and even though he doesn't, he says it's ridiculous. Anyone could do that with the right training. To put it simply, the teachers are way too weak, and that only makes the professor more excited. He keeps pushing Gray to move into the magic class as soon as possible. Of course, Gray turns him down. He was always told he had no talent for magic, and that just gets the professor even more worked up. He says he's never seen anyone use ether compression so easily. In his eyes, it would be a waste if Gray focused only on swordsmanship. What really matters is that this suddenly unlocks memories Gray had buried until now. The one who taught him the little magic he knows was Vela, and she always cared most about people who didn't even know Odo existed, the life force that makes strong spells much harder to cast without it. With that in mind, he asks the professor if he knows what Odo is, and when the man has no idea, Gray understands why he's so strong. He knows techniques nobody else does, knowledge from the future that makes magic easier to use, to the point that even someone as weak as he used to be is now among the strongest. Still, he has to be very careful with that information, so he refuses to join the magic class, and the professor tells him the door will always stay open for someone like him. In the end, he sends Gray back to his seat, making it clear that it doesn't matter if he gets distracted or bored, because the class is clearly too basic for him. Everyone is stunned except Leonhardt, whose reaction is a little different. Now he looks at Gray with pure admiration, and honestly that gives him chills. Later on, Gray gets a letter from Ariel asking him to come to her office. He wonders if it has something to do with what happened that morning. When he reaches the door, it tells him to come in before he can even knock, like it can somehow see through walls. But that's not even the strangest part. The The second he enters, a sword comes flying straight at him. He manages to block it, then freezes when he sees that the attacker isn't Ariel, but a blue-haired girl who looks very familiar. The problem is, before he can figure out where he knows her from, something else grabs his attention. Ariel is watching from her desk with two other professors beside her. She says she knew her guess about him was right, but the men still aren't fully convinced, so they ask the girl if she really attacked with everything she had. And here's where it gets interesting. They call her him, so Gray realizes this is him, Albright, the girl who will become the strongest sorcerer in the world. Before he can react, Ariel says it's obvious the protagonist gave it her all, and forces the others to pay up, because they had made a bet on whether Gray could withstand an attack from someone as powerful as the blue-haired girl. Ariel decides to be generous, and gives Gray part of her winnings, a gold coin worth a small fortune. While he nearly panics from holding something so valuable, the professors admit Ariel was right about her theory from the other day. Gray had been protecting himself by avoiding use of his dominant arm on purpose, which could only mean he was dealing with some kind of injury, and that hurt his performance during the test. Of course, they're completely right. Gray wonders how they figured it out, and they tell him that if they hadn't noticed, they wouldn't deserve to call themselves professors. Still, Ariel was the first one to catch it during the exam, so the others have to admit he really does have great potential. The problem is, potential alone isn't enough. Before leaving, one of them warns that he better recover, or he won't meet the standards for the sword course. After that, Gray is left alone with Bella and Ariel, who asks him to have a talk about magic. She makes it clear she heard what happened in class earlier. In fact, the professor personally came to her demanding Gray be transferred, but she refused to because she believes he's better suited for the sword than for magic. Even so, what he did was impressive. Clearly impulsive, with little understanding of ether, yet still something very few people can pull off. So she wants to hear his secret. She even offers money, and promises that whatever he says will stay in that room. She doesn't need the answer for Bella, who is a genius at magic theory but not nearly as good at putting it into practice. For some reason, MC just can't properly use ether compression, which makes sense to Gray. He already knew Bella took a long time to unlock her true talent. Ariel keeps pressing him if he can help her. He can save Bella from being sent to Professor Bradley, a man Gray recognizes right away, because he's infamous for carrying out experiments on humans, and in the future he'll even become the cause of terrible magical disasters, the worst magic criminal in history. But for some reason, Ariel explains that if Bella doesn't improve before the end of the year, she'll be sent to him for a surgery that's supposed to improve her magic. Ariel wants no part of that, and she says it herself. Dozens of people have died because of his horrific methods. Even so, Bella would rather risk that than be expelled. That puts Gray in a hard spot because revealing this kind of knowledge could literally change history, especially since Bella would probably discover Odo on her own eventually. Even so, when he thinks about all the damage the Liquidator will cause, he tells himself that this is exactly why he's here, to change that terrible future, so he promises to teach them everything he knows. After that, we move to the training grounds, where Gray explains everything Bella once taught him, well, from his future, and they do it under a magic contract that forces everyone to keep it secret no matter what. At first, what Gray tells them sounds insane, but the more they think it over, the more sense it makes. Bella gets excited, saying it literally sounds like magic from the future. On top of that, none of his ideas go against how current magic works. They just add to it. So the blue-haired girl decides to test it by using the knowledge he gave her to cast a spell at full power. For Gray, though, that is not exciting at all. He's seen what Bella can do, and he knows one of her attacks can wipe out an entire city. Not only that, but she's so powerful that the odds of her controlling all that power at this point are low. The problem is, before he can tell her to stop, Bella fires the spell and in a single second, blows away the whole training field. That includes Gray, who would have been completely burned alive if he hadn't managed to seize control of the energy at the last second. In fact, she handles it so well that it changes from a blast like a nuclear bomb into a huge dragon shape that flies through the flames. Then she collapses. At first, Gray worries, but Ariel explains that the poor girl just ran out of ether. Even so, she can't deny that what Bella pulled off in a single try was absolutely incredible, and it proves just how much power was inside her waiting to come out. With the little strength she has left, the protagonist insists she couldn't have done it without Gray, but all he can think is that he merely taught her something she was the one meant to create. The important part is that they managed to save her from a surgery so dangerous it wouldn't just have risked her life. If she survived, it likely would have taken away her control. That famous procedure can grant huge magical power in exchange for the user's control over it, which explains why the future Vela was always so careful with her magic. One spell could put her life and everyone else's in danger. Anyway, now it's Ariel's turn to keep her side of the deal, because what Gray asked in exchange for teaching them about Odo was for her to heal his arm. The redhead says there's a very special kind of magic she wants to use on him, and with that she gently places her hand on his wound. Blue energy wraps around it, and after a few minutes it fades until Gray can move his arm completely again. He's completely shocked, because not even a top-grade healing potion had that kind of effect. Proudly, Ariel explains that her highly specialized magic is far beyond those potions. Then she tells him to test his arm with a sword, so Gray starts throwing out a string of slashes and realizes that even if it looks fine, it doesn't feel like it moves the same as before. Ariel understands that right away. She says that while she repaired his nerves, her magic can't heal wounds to the soul, a concept most people still don't accept, but one she firmly believes in, because her eye can see it. Even right now, she can tell his soul is slowly healing. So physically his arm is perfect, but he still needs more rest for his soul to recover. For now though, he can train like normal, and she'd actually like to watch him fight so she can understand what kind of swordsmanship he uses, and why it can damage a person's soul so badly. From the way she explains it, the soul matters here just like ether and Odo, because Ariel says there's a sword technique that uses the soul to move the blade. The swordsmanship of Amy. Gray is stunned to hear that name because at this point in the world's history she is still far from the sword saint he once knew. Still, Ariel is very sharp, and points out that he moves his sword in the exact same way Amy does, except it feels like the person who taught him was even more skilled. And of course Gray's first teacher really was her. It was future Amy, so he quickly changes the subject and asks how swordsmanship can affect the soul. Ariel says that can happen with a very rare style of swordsmanship, the same kind used to bring down an ogre general in a single slash. At that point, it's obvious Ariel knows the truth, and she's not just thanking him for basically winning her another bet. She explains that she saw how that battle ended, so she knows normal techniques could never have done it. There's a strange power her eye can see, something slowly leaking through a chained door. Of course she means the same door Gray saw the last time he used his ability. Then she says something even more shocking. She doesn't fully understand that power, but she has seen something similar to his before, a force tied to a being called the Liquidator. Gray freezes on the spot. He doesn't know what to say or even think, because the Liquidator shouldn't have appeared yet. It's not supposed to exist in this time period. Seeing his reaction, Ariel realizes he already knows about the Liquidator. She's almost surprised, but then remembers that Gray always seems to know things nobody else should, like knowledge from the future. This woman is way sharper than she first looked, so she asks him directly what he knows about the Liquidator. Gray only says it is a huge threat to humanity. He stresses that it has to be stopped before it appears and destroyed if possible. Hearing how serious he is, Ariel thinks he may be overdoing it a little. But if that's true, then the answer is simple. They need to stop Professor Bradley's experiments. That's because she already knows about the Liquidator. It's the being Bradley is trying to summon. Now that really shocks Gray because in the future he never knew where that monster came from. He once believed nobody knew, but the more he thinks about it, the more sense it makes. In humanity's final years, the Academy always acted like it knew exactly where the Liquidator would appear. So the one left in the dark was him. And since Professor Bradley is part of the Academy, the conclusion is obvious. The World Academy was involved with that creature all along. That's why Gray tells Ariel the experiment must be stopped right away. Ariel agrees, but she doesn't have the authority to stop another professor of equal rank. She even says she already tried pushing her superiors to cancel it. Worse, she isn't allowed to tell Gray who those higher-ups are. This place runs on a strict chain of command, and someone like her can't break it. At this point in the story, the full scale of Professor Bradley's crimes still hasn't come out, so Gray tells her he knows exactly where the bastard's hideout is. Maybe they can catch him in the act. The problem is that the Academy still backs him, so if they go in without solid proof, they'll be the ones who end up locked up. With that in mind, Ariel asks if he has any evidence. But beyond what he knows, Gray admits his hands are tied too. Ariel then changes the subject and says there's someone at the Academy who might help him control his power, a genius when it comes to unknown forces. It's Hector Philo, a name Gray recognizes right away as the man who trained the Sword Saint. Kindly, Ariel offers to set up a private lesson so he can start training with him the very next day. And Gray gets excited because that's exactly why he came here in the first place, to control his power. From there, we jump straight to training with Hector, and it starts in the most random way possible. The guy literally makes him sprint through the Academy forest at full speed. Worst of all, he doesn't even let Gray drift off or think about anything but running. The goal is to wear out his body because only then can he awaken his student's power. Is it insane? Absolutely. Still, Gray keeps telling himself, Hector knows what he's doing, even while another part of him can't stop thinking that every second he wastes running around, Professor Bradley is messing with the fate of the world. And that goes on for a full week, until Ariel calls him in to ask how training has been. Gray takes the chance to complain that all he's done is run the whole week. But then things suddenly get more serious when Ariel receives a letter that changes her expression at once. Gray notices and asks what's wrong, and she hands over the letter, one written by Professor Bradley himself. It says Bella's abilities have not improved under the terms of their contract, which means the operation will move forward. Gray immediately shouts that it's insane, and asks if there's any way to refuse, but Ariel explains the only way is if the professor cancels it. Otherwise, MC's only choices are the operation or expulsion. That's why, even after refusing before, Ariel asks where Bradley's lab is. If they expose him as a criminal, the contract terms will be void. As for proof, she trusts Gray to help her find it, because she knows he's been telling the truth this whole time, and together they'll drag that criminal into the light. With that decided, Gray reveals that the lab is in the mountains near Toril Village, and Ariel remembers that bastard has an Academy-approved lab in that same area, which means he's been using it as the perfect cover for his illegal experiments. On top of that, everyone knows no Academy professor would interfere with another professor's lab for no reason, which means they need evidence now more than ever if they want to stop him. Still, before they can talk more about it, Bella walks into the office. She got the same terrible letter too. Ariel quickly takes it from her and assures her she doesn't need to worry about that. He clearly has no idea what's really going on, so she asks if Ariel really plans to fight Bradley all alone. Ariel answers that her own strength is more than enough. Even so, Gray knows what that bastard is capable of, and he has a very bad feeling, so he offers to go with her. Bella does the same, insisting she can't let them risk themselves for her. It sounds like a solid plan, except Ariel reminds them Bradley is still a professor, and who knows what he might do to them. Gray says that's exactly why they need to work together, because if they use the same power he used to defeat the ogre general, their chances of winning go up a lot. Seeing how determined they both are, Ariel knows they'll go no matter what she says, so she finally agrees on one condition. No matter what happens, they must put their own safety first. With that settled, they head out, and we move straight to the forest outside the lab entrance, where the three of them study the place and confirm no one seems to be around. That makes it the perfect time to go in. The basic plan is to sneak inside while Bradley is at a conference with the Magic Society and search for anything they can use as evidence. Of course, there's a good chance the place is full of traps, so they have to be careful. Bella worries they might get caught, but Ariel calmly tells her she can turn back whenever she wants. Still, the protagonist is determined to help them, and she doesn't understand why they're risking so much for someone like her. Gray cuts in right away. They're not doing this just for her. Stopping these experiments could literally save the world. That only leaves the blue-haired girl even more confused, and Ariel says that's probably going too far, but she agrees they need to think this through carefully. Even so, they came here by choice, and with that resolve they'll finish the mission. So they move out and sneak forward, until Ariel uses her fire magic to blast open part of a side wall of the fortress, which leads straight into the prison where that bastard keeps all his victims locked up. Some of them are dead, and some still seem alive. But the worst part is that none of them move or call for help. At a glance, Ariel spots at least 14 forbidden spells, each one serious enough to count as a crime on its own. They don't even need to bring up the illegal human experiments to throw that monster in jail, though those crimes will make sure he never gets out. But all of that takes a back seat when they reach a chamber with an altar in the center, and Bella asks if they should take the evidence and run or rescue the people. Gray says the smartest move is to leave before Bradley returns. The problem is that right then, a voice behind them asks if they mean him, and of course it's Varian Bradley himself, who definitely should not be there. Before they can even ask, he explains that he used a modified spell to send a double to the conference in his place, because he had a very important experiment to finish, now that he had just received fresh materials. Then the bastard turns, and it becomes horribly clear that by materials he means dozens of human corpses. But worse than that, after seeing them here, he decides on a change of plans. Now he wants to use them instead. Exceptional people with far more magic power than any normal human could ever have. With a smug tone, he says he doesn't know how they found out about his experiments. Still, he's sure they didn't tell anyone they were coming, which means he can use them however he wants, because if they vanish, there's no way the Academy would ever suspect him. Not holding back at all, Ariel asks if he plans to use them as lab rats. Bradley tells her to calm down. One thing is certain, he has no plan to let any of them leave alive, so he might as well use them to push magic even further. The sick part is, he's so sure he can win that he barely reacts in time when a blast of fire comes straight at him and sets much of the lab ablaze. The shocking part is, it didn't come from Ariel. Bella is the one glaring at him like she wants him dead. But once the smoke clears, Bradley is still standing there without a scratch. He managed to raise a force field just in time, then shamelessly praises Bella's strength, saying Ariel's divine eye clearly hasn't lost its touch. He didn't expect C to be this powerful, and now he's thinking maybe he should take a closer look at the other new students too. Then he asks if she's really willing to kill her own teacher while she's still a student. She shoots back that it's better than becoming a lab rat, and for a second it feels like a full battle is about to start. But Ariel cuts in. They already have enough proof, so now they need to leave. The problem is, Bradley won't make that easy. He fires off a powerful dark magic attack that Ariel blocks at the last second, until he mocks her and says it's pointless. This is one of the finest results of his research, the Flame of Gluttony, a fire that can devour defensive magic and turn it into fuel for itself. In other words, it can't really be blocked, and that becomes obvious when Ariel's shield starts cracking apart, to the point that she has to call on part of her divine eye's power to create a second layer of protection. Sadly, it's clear that won't hold for long either, so she hands the kids a memory bag and says Hector will know what to do the moment he sees it. In short, she wants them to run, but Bella does the exact opposite, and uses her magic to put up a third barrier, holding it in place until Ariel yells that they had a deal. Bradley's magic is too abnormal for them to handle, so she'll buy them the only thing that can save them time. But then comes the real shock. Ariel's barrier breaks and the only one still standing is Bella. Not only does she endure it, she starts wearing Bradley's magic down little by little, because she reveals that they just needed a slightly different approach. Of course, Ariel isn't the most surprised. That title goes to Bradley, who insists it's impossible, there's no way she could have made a counterspell this fast. Bella explains that she recently learned a very interesting theory and it made figuring out his trick a whole lot easier. That sends Bradley into a rage, and he starts screaming, demanding to know who taught her. The protagonist only says it's a secret, though she'll give him one hint. Her tutor was another student. Bradley takes that like a bad joke, then grabs a strange magic crystal and crushes it into countless pieces. He warns them this will be their end, and within seconds hundreds of eerie skulls made of energy join his earlier spell. That not only makes it stronger, but Bella's own energy starts to give out, which Bradley notices right away. He figures she has at most 1 minute of ether left. Getting desperate, MC tells Ariel to use every second she can to attack, and Ariel uses her eye to search for any option they have left, realizing she can project her mana outside the barrier. So she does, and within seconds she fires a beam of energy that looks amazing at first, but not for long. It turns out the Redhead's offensive magic is one of the weakest among the Academy staff, and Bradley's flames can absorb part of its power, making the whole attack useless. Once again, their chances of winning look terrible. Bella asks what they can even do because she can't hold on much longer. That's when Gray tells them to move aside. It's his turn now. At first glance, his sword should never be able to reach that bastard from this far away, but there is one way, since Ariel is the only one who knows it. She warns him that using that power again could kill him, and even if he survives, he may never use his injured arm again. Gray doesn't care if he dies doing what has to be done, so he jumps over the flames and rushes Bradley with a sharp, quick movement, cutting off his head. It happens so fast that Bella can barely believe what she just saw. Then Bradley's body drops to the floor, completely still. Ariel is just as shocked, though even more excited, because this is the first time she's had the chance to see that power in action. But then another problem starts. The slash was so strong that it wrecked a huge part of the structure, bringing the ceiling down and threatening to crush them too. Ariel steps forward and uses her own power to stop even the smallest piece of rubble. Even so, all she can do is ask Gray how he managed to go beyond all her expectations and how his arm feels. In response, he drops the sword without meaning to, because a fierce pain is running through every part of his body. On top of that, there's a worrying numbness. We can also tell the black mark has spread, but the good news is he can still stand and still move that arm. If the Gray from a few months ago had tried something like that, he would have passed out for days. That means Hector's weird training is somehow actually working. Naturally, Ariel thanks him, because if they're still alive, it's thanks to him. Still, she apologizes for being so weak that she practically forced him to use that power. Gray tells her he's the one who dragged them into this by insisting they stop that bastard once and for all. Either way, the important thing now is Ariel warning him not to use that power again for a while, because next time the damage will be irreversible. From how serious she sounds, Gray realizes she truly means it, so he agrees. Seeing that, Bella takes the chance to ask what he used and why she didn't feel even the slightest trace of ether leaving his body. The more she thinks about what she saw, the less sense it makes. But Ariel says it has to stay that way. She must not dig any deeper into the matter, ask questions, or say a single word about what she saw, or Ariel will be forced to erase her memories. With that on the table, Bella promises to play by their rules and even suggests a magic contract so they can trust her completely. So they sign the contract, and now that Bradley is down, Gray is the first to say they should ignore the experiments for now and help the victims, who seem to have been put to sleep by some kind of dark magic. Ariel suggests taking them to the Academy infirmary, and they use a protective spell to cover everyone with a shield that will keep them safe until they leave. That buys them a little more time to keep searching the lab, and that's when they discover all of Bradley's experiments were about using human sacrifices to make magic catalysts or improve people's magical abilities. The strange part is, nothing there seems connected to the liquidator, so they wonder if it might be in another facility, but Gray is sure it has to be here, because this is where the disaster happened in the other timeline, the one that killed tens of thousands of people, and he believes only the liquidator could have caused something like that, until he remembers that what killed those people was a mass that burst from the ground. If that's true, then what he's looking for isn't out in the open, but underground. So he asks Ariel to scan the area for underground passages, and to everyone's surprise, she actually does end up finding traces of short-range teleportation magic in certain parts of the floor. That supports the idea that there's a hidden space below that can only be reached with that kind of magic, and based on the energy used, she guesses it's around 300 meters down, almost half a kilometer underground. It's dangerous, but they can try. So Ariel summons a teleportation gate over those traces, explaining that if there's nothing there, the other side should just open into dirt. But then comes another shock. The gate opens and reveals a massive underground city that's giving off ether from everywhere, especially from a dome right in the center. And Ariel can tell it isn't just ether. A completely different kind of power is leaking out from there too. The power of the liquidator. Clearly that is exactly where they need to go. So they head inside the dome and find a strange door standing by itself, very similar to the one Gray saw before. What's even weirder is that it stands inside a very suspicious magic circle. But Ariel doesn't sense any danger, so she touches it, checks it closely, and even opens it, also casually that Bella nearly has a heart attack. Ariel calms her down, saying the door itself has no power. It's just there as a symbol for the ritual. The real power isn't in the door, but in the magical structures that make up the circle around it. Then out of nowhere, they activate and start glowing in a way that can't mean anything good. Gray instantly yells for her to stop, because Ariel is the one who triggered the structures. She simply steps away from the circle, staying calm because she believes that setup can't truly summon the liquidator. That becomes even clearer when the surface of the door cracks and a dark energy like Gray's tries to come out. But before it can fully emerge, the structures run out of power. Everything settles down and the crack slowly closes too. Ariel explains that those devices weren't made to call the liquidator itself. They open a breach to the plane where it exists and channel the power leaking through. There's also a filter, the thing that directs all that power, and it's made of most likely with human sacrifices, just like the results of the experiments they saw up above. Shaken, Bella asks why Bradley would go this far just to gather that power, and Ariel asks if she remembers the black flame that bastard used in the fight, or that strange exploding crystal. Those were clearly made from this same energy, just rough test versions of the power behind that door. In the end, the cracks finish closing, and Gray wonders if Bradley really was trying to summon the liquidator after all. Ariel says she's not sure. Maybe yes, maybe no. Most likely he tried and failed because he didn't have enough power. But the biggest issue is this. Even one of those power structures should cost as much as an entire nation's yearly budget. Making aid is on another level, so Bella wonders if the Discar Empire helped fund it. Ariel doesn't think so. That kind of money could only come from a group whose magic research surpasses even an empire like that. There's really only one place it could be from. Gray says the only thing that makes sense is the World Union Academy, and Ariel agrees completely. No other research group could pay for something this insane. Confused, Bella asks if the Academy isn't supposed to protect the world from threats and all that noble stuff. Even so, Ariel says that's still the only real answer. Gray tries to stay hopeful, saying not everyone in the higher ranks would support methods like this. He remembers clearly that in the other timeline, they never abandoned civilians when the Liquidator came, so he refuses to believe the Academy is a direct enemy of humanity. Ariel agrees most of its members are good people and would never allow these horrible experiments. But the Academy is full of researchers, factions, and leaders, so the possibilities are endless. Whoever was behind this had support from someone incredibly powerful, and as someone who has watched them for decades, Ariel warns that they can't trust the Academy blindly. Most likely the people behind this believe they're helping humanity, and that's what makes it worse. The place was built so carefully that finding any clue leading to the mastermind will be nearly impossible, and if that wasn't bad enough, everything around them starts exploding, which means they set up evidence-destroying mechanisms linked to Bradley's death. Bella panics and yells that they need to get out, but Ariel calmly says they're just explosives. She's not weak enough to let them die from something like that, and within seconds, she starts draining energy from the strange structures to make her own magic circle around the group. In a firm voice, she tells them not to move as debris crashes down all around them. A moment later, it turns out she managed to teleport everyone to the outer part of the forest. Better yet, she also brought every victim who was still alive, and maybe most important of all of the famous energy structures too. It was a risky move, but it was the best idea she had because knowing the Academy's higher-ups, she'll need to show them this if she wants a case solid enough that they can't ignore it. And so the next day, they go to the director's office. The director turns out to be Alexandro, the same man Gray had mistaken for a simple assistant. He welcomes them in, and after explaining that the survivors are already being treated in the medical wing, he thanks them for stopping Bradley's illegal experiments. As for the strange power structures, the analysis confirms each one is worth more than a whole nation's yearly budget. But the real question is where they came from. They were stolen goods taken during an attack on their transport, an attack that left 78 Academy agents dead, completely wiped out. That shocks everyone except Ariel, who already knows about the case. It happened 15 years ago and was carried out by Blood Drinker, the largest criminal organization in the world. Just hearing that name sets something off in Bella, because they were also the ones who killed her parents. The problem is the group has many branches, and nobody knows where they hide or who really leads them. The only thing anyone knows for sure is that they're behind 70% of crime worldwide, so it wouldn't be shocking if they had people inside the Academy itself. That stuns Gray since he always saw this place as something ideal. But Ariel reminds him that the Academy doesn't judge by gender, name, or social class. That openness lets talented people from all over the world grow stronger, but criminals can take advantage of that too and slip inside. It sounds insane, and Bella insists they need to find them and drive them out. The director agrees, but he's still just a subordinate. His authority has limits. If they want to learn who's behind all this, the only advice he can give them is to become stronger. He reveals that even among the students, some are so powerful they hold more influence than he does. And in this place, strength is everything. That means they can make a difference too. That clearly fires the group up, while Alexandro studies them and thinks Ariel couldn't have beaten Bradley alone. So one of those two must have done it, and he can't wait to see what kind of monsters they'll become. After the meeting, Gray looks at the mark on his arm and realizes that whether he wants to defeat the Liquidator or uncover this place's secrets, the answer is the same. Get stronger. He keeps thinking about that for a while, until he accidentally bumps into another student with black hair. The shock comes when, before Gray can apologize, the guy attacks him with a kick so fast he barely blocks it. Then the stranger starts insulting him, telling him to watch where he's going and mocking him as trash from special admission. It's obvious the bastard wants a fight. Gray is just about to draw his sword when the guy spots Ariel coming over and decides to back off for now. It seems pointless at first, but once he gets far enough, he starts muttering to himself, because apparently someone ordered him to keep an eye on Gray, and that someone was Bradley himself. So now it's unclear whether that was a new order, and the mage isn't really dead or just an old one. Either way, when Gray tries to report him to the redhead, there's not much she can do since it was an attack without magic or weapons. Still, she says he could always settle it himself by beating the guy up while she pretends not to notice. Gray completely wastes that chance, and instead admits it isn't the first time people have mocked him for getting in through special admission. But it is the first time it turned physical. Seeing how badly he and the others had been treated, Ariel apologizes, saying that if she had more authority in the academy, no one would dare question her decisions. Gray tells her not to worry, because thanks to her he's here, and he's sure that he, Bella, and the others will eventually prove to the world that the Divine Eye program was not a mistake. After all, she has a great eye for talent. She thanks him but says she still hopes he'll stand up for himself sometimes. Then she adds that out of everyone in the Divine Eye group, he's the one she expects the most extraordinary things from. She's sure Bella, Yemi, and the others can become top-class heroes too. But the first time she truly believed someone might surpass the limits of humanity was when she met him. At first, Gray thinks it's ridiculous to compare himself to those great heroes, but seeing how sure Ariel is, he tells himself that kind of doubt is for someone who's already given up. He may have beaten one of the Lynx and bought some time, but humanity is still in danger. The fate of the world is still in his hands. After that, things sort of return to normal, and soon they're in a practical sword class where each student has to face another in a one-on-one match. Gray decides to do his best to prove he deserves to be there. The problem is, his opponent is none other than Leon Hart, the student with the best sword skill. Seeing the shock on his face, the teacher explains he paired students with similar skill levels, so no one would hold back. Of course, Gray sells himself short. Even after defeating an ogre general weeks earlier, he still thinks he's not on Leon Hart's level. On top of that, he assumes the blonde guy still hates him and will use this chance to crush him. Either way, the matches begin, and Leon Hart decides to go all out to prove his worth. The result is a brutal opening that Gray can't answer. He can only block, and then more and more fast strikes keep coming. Right away, it's clear this won't be an easy fight. After a while, Gray finally strikes back, and his attack is so fierce that Leon Hart admits he doesn't get how Gray failed to enter through regular admission. That bit of respect boosts Gray's confidence right away, and the fight starts feeling far less one-sided. Little by little, his counters get faster and sharper, and he realizes that even though he thought Leon Hart would destroy him instantly, he's actually holding up pretty well. Still, the gap between them is obvious. Gray may have the story on his side, but Leon Hart's technique is so perfect it's honestly scary. Gray thinks Leon Hart is a monster, or at least he would have been to himself from the other timeline, because now the difference is that he knows how to deal with monsters like that. He uses all the experience he's gained to read the beast's moves until even Leon Hart admits he hasn't had this much fun in a long time. But that's exactly the problem. The bastard is enjoying himself. He doesn't even look tired, so Gray knows he has to end this fast. That makes him remember what the teacher said before the match started, fight like it's a real battle. And what does that mean? Pretty much anything goes. So Gray dodges the next strike with a quick move, then kicks Leon Hart's leg and knocks him off balance. On top of that, while the blonde is still in the air, Gray takes advantage of the fact that he can't dodge, and attacks with a look that makes it clear he's treating this like a life-or-death fight. The problem is Leon Hart can't afford to lose either. Even as he's about to hit the ground, he stretches out his arm so his sword reaches Gray's neck at the exact same moment. Gray's blade reaches his. That's why Gray helps him up and calls it a draw. But the blonde doesn't agree. In that last exchange, he says he could have stabbed Gray through the heart if he wanted to. Since it was only practice, Gray went for the neck instead, and that gave Leon Hart just enough time to react. Even so, whether Gray wants to admit it or not, that changes the result. Leon Hart won. What's surprising is how well the blonde takes it. He insists that thanks to Gray, he finally understands the difference between a real fight and sword practice, because fighting is about way more than sword skill. Still, being humble doesn't change the fact that Gray cheated. Leon Hart answers that in a real fight, it's completely fine to cheat, then suggests they do another round. Gray isn't too sure, since his stamina is nowhere near Leon Hart's and there's no way he can keep up again. Luckily, or maybe not, they get interrupted by a huge guy who says that real training or not, the teacher never said they could use kicks or anything besides a sword. He also can't understand how a loser like Gray got paired with the best first-year student, basically insulting him for no reason. That's when Leon Hart steps in and says he's the only one strong enough to fight Gray. In other words, Gray is the strong one here, not him. And that gets backed up by the teacher, who says the two are at a very similar level. And if he doesn't believe it, he's free to test it himself. If he beats Gray, then he can fight Leon Hart. The guy confidently accepts and boasts that unlike others, he beat the examiner in the entrance exam, which Leon Hart says was his biggest mistake, the same one he made himself, judging Gray without knowing his real strength. The good part is that more people will finally see how strong Gray is and give him credit. The bad part is that this idiot is ruining his precious time with Gray, so Leon Hart starts glaring at him like he wants to kill him. Of course, the bully notices and has no idea what's going on. Still, all of that stops mattering when the teacher says they can begin, because Gray can tell right away the guy has way more physical endurance than he does. It's a challenge he has to face, and meanwhile, that jerk charges at him with one goal: put the special admission student in his place. To his real surprise, Gray doesn't just block the attack with one simple swing of his sword, he knocks him away like he's nothing. The bully's confused face is worth it, but Gray stays focused and thinks that this guy's strength is nothing special. He even starts wondering if the idiot is holding back, because he's absurdly weak. Then within seconds, Gray throws one plain strike that somehow ends up dropping him for good and ending the fight. It all happens so fast that Gray actually apologizes, because he didn't mean to be that rough. Even after being humiliated, the guy jumps back up and asks for a second round. The teacher allows it, saying they can fight as many times as needed until he understands that Gray is not weak at all. So they keep going until the guy is so beaten up that he has to be dragged to the infirmary. And then the teacher announces that as two of the strongest, Leonhardt and Gray have earned the right to represent the first years in the inter-year battle, where they'll face the strongest second years. So far, the first years have lost 35 times in a row, but this year they believe things will be different. Of course, Gray can't help asking if the power gap between the 2 years is really that big, and the teacher answers honestly, yes. In fact, it's not unusual or even especially disappointing when the first years lose. Just being chosen to fight is already an honor, and if they somehow win, they'll be seen as some kind of miracle. That's why he calmly tells them not to stress too much. That eases Gray's mind, but he still thinks he has to use this chance to change what people think about the special students chosen by the Divine Eye and prove they can fight. Of course, that means training even harder. But all of that gets pushed aside when we cut to a meeting between the teachers and an old man named Bruta from the magic department, who asks to speak and proposes that the student Amy White be expelled. Ariel immediately asks why, since she's the one in charge of the Divine Eye students, and he says that's exactly the problem. The girl failed the exam to move up to 3rd year, and even so, she was allowed to stay only because she was a special admission. Honestly, the old man has a point. Every other student who failed was expelled, so it seems unfair. Ariel explains that the girl can't show her true potential because of the heavy side effects on her body, but she's absolutely on track to become a world-class warrior. The problem is the other teachers think that's just a sad excuse, and they ask how long it's supposed to take for these amazing powers to finally appear. Ariel says Amy could gain full control at any time. They just need patience and need to hold on to the Academy's goal of nurturing hidden outstanding talent from all over the world. Sadly, no argument works when those idiots refuse to listen, because Brutus says that the Divine Eye that once made her famous isn't as sharp as it used to be, and the proof is that all the current students she picked are complete failures. Worse, he and another teacher suggest it might be time to get rid of the Divine Eye special admission system, pointing out that if more than half the teachers agree, they can vote to expel every one of those so-called failures. That makes even the teachers who had stayed quiet start to hesitate, and one of them says Bella has improved, but she still isn't as impressive as Ariel promised, and overall the whole Divine Eye issue feels like charity for people without talent. Little by little, the redhead realizes there are far more people against her than for her, and Bruta tops it all off by asking if she really believes she can judge talent better than all of them. Of course, even if she wants to say yes, Ariel knows that would only make the people who already hate her even angrier, while also hurting the pride of those who are still unsure, making the whole situation worse. If she wants to come out on top, she has to be very careful about what she says next. So instead of reacting to Bruta's insults, mockery, and accusations, she stays silent and repeats to herself again and again that she still has the touch. Her students just need a little more time. But she can't think of any way to stop them from being expelled until one of the teachers mentions Gray. They know he was chosen to represent the first years, but they doubt he'll accomplish anything. Then Bruta himself proposes deciding the future of the Divine Eye program based on the results of the competition. Unsure, Ariel turns to Hector, and his look tells her it won't work. So she explains that Gray's power isn't really suited for mock battles. His true strength only shows in life or death situations, which the teachers once again treat like an excuse. Honestly, it does sound like one. So they declare that if Ariel tries to refuse, the headmaster, tired of the argument, steps in and says they'll continue this discussion after they see his performance in the competition. In the end, everyone leaves, but the redhead stays behind, trembling because she feels she's failed them. Gray's powers not only aren't fit for this kind of practice match, it's also still too soon for him to use them again. And if he pushes himself, he could die. Even so, a selfish part of her still hopes he can do it, so the other rough gems can survive until they're ready to shine. But for that to happen, he'll have to do something incredible. Then we jump straight to the day of the inter-year battle, where all the students gather in the Coliseum, watching closely as the first-year challengers are introduced, Leonhardt and Gray, who've earned the right to face the strongest second-year student, Lucian Hartman. At least that's what everyone thought. But then comes the surprise: they introduce a second-year student, Raida, the same guy who jumped Gray in the hallway. Of course, that leaves everyone wondering how this battle will work, but that gets explained later. The point is that Gray recognizes him and wonders if they'll have to fight him too. While they're being watched closely by all the teachers, Lionel notices and says that last year only a few of them showed up, which means something has changed. Leonhardt figures it out right away and says they must be curious about Gray. Lionel thinks he's exaggerating, but then it turns out Bruta heard him and confirms it. They're here to witness the final end of the Divine Eye students because yes, even though Ariel said nothing, because she didn't want to put all the pressure on him, this bastard makes sure to lay it all out, making it clear to everyone that his future and the future of the other so-called failures depends on how he performs. Since nobody believes he can win, they're all here to watch the Divine Eye students fall. That makes the protagonist ask Ariel if it's true, but because she wants to avoid him putting himself in danger at all costs, she forces a smile and says Bruta just wants to throw him off. It might have worked if the protagonist hadn't noticed how badly she was shaking, so he only tells her he trusts her, while Bruta keeps tearing into the woman. insisting that today will prove she's a fraud. That's when the whole exchange takes a turn. The protagonist says he can't let comments like that slide. Insult him all you want, but he won't let anyone look down on Ariel's judgment. Of course, that only leads Bruta to throw it back in his face again. Him and the others are failures. So right there, the protagonist declares that he'll prove them wrong. With a statement like that out in the open, it's obvious the match just got a lot more interesting. Then the announcer tells them to take their places, and Gray wonders what the hell is going on. It looks like this really will be a 2-on-1, because he figures that if he'd been matched with Luniel, he might still have had a chance. Instead, he got Rada. He may not be the strongest, but he's one of the few who survived Bradley's experiments, after Bradley surgically rewired his brain to give him superhuman reflexes. And since Gray's fighting style depends a lot on surprise attacks, he's in serious trouble. So Gray is warned not to push too hard if that reckless idiot is thinking about using his ability. Hearing that, the protagonist just says there's nothing to worry about. The first fight starts with the top 2 students, and the announcer explains that the arena is covered by protective magic to stop fatal injuries. In other words, they can fight like it's life or death, knowing the match will end before anyone is actually killed. So the moment the signal is given, Leonhardt instantly rushes Luniel at full speed, while Luniel sets up in a defensive stance, ready to take whatever comes. Still, he doesn't wait long to strike back. The second he gets an opening, he swings his sword, and Leonhardt narrowly slips past it. Right after that, he plants himself on the ground and throws a hard kick at Luniel's face, copying the move Gray used when they fought. The problem is, Luniel isn't stupid. He dodges it and admits Leonhardt is pretty strong, stronger than Luniel was in his own first year. Sadly, that just gives him the excuse to raise the pace. Now it's his turn, and he unloads a storm of attacks that are not only incredibly fast, but also force Leonhardt backward across the arena until he's literally trapped against the ropes, cornered with nowhere left to go. Luniel aims straight for his neck, and when the blade stops just inches from his skin, the alarm sounds to mark the end of the match. Naturally, the result surprises no one. Leonhardt steps back as the announcer says it's time for the second strongest fighters, Gray versus Rada. With that, the protagonist slowly walks to the center of the arena and tells himself he's faced opponents far stronger than this. On top of that, Ariel and the others are counting on him, so he can't fail. Then Rada drags his sword forward and tells Professor Bradley to be patient, because in just a few seconds, he'll send Gray straight to hell. That confirms Bradley isn't alive at all. This emo guy is actually insane. And the worst part is, he's insanely strong, which becomes obvious to the protagonist the moment their swords clash for the first time. The impact is brutal, throwing him back at once and leaving his arm shaking. In that instant, he realizes every warning about the madman's reflexes was true. His reactions are ridiculous, and paired with that powerful right arm, they start shutting down every plan the protagonist had for winning this fight. He's only been in the arena for a second, and the only thing he can think is that he needs to use his ability. But then he remembers what Ariel told him before the match. The chances of dying if he activates that power are extremely high. The competition matters, sure, but not enough to risk his life. And the arena's magic barrier wasn't made for his power, so if he loses control, he could kill his opponent. Back in the present, that's why Gray holds the line. He may gamble with his own life, but he's not desperate enough to kill an innocent person. What he doesn't know is that Rada doesn't feel the same. Tired of waiting for the protagonist to counter, he launches his own attack, a flurry of quick exact strikes that, oddly enough, are almost overshadowed by the strange muttering. He keeps repeating again and again. The good part is that on a technical level, his moves are actually very simple, and with Gray's overall stats, he should be able to end the match fast. So he starts wondering if Rada is planning something weird, which is confirmed when he looks up and sees a pair of crazed eyes full of bloodlust. Then Rada manages to drive his sword straight toward Gray's eye, and Gray instantly knows he won't be able to dodge that. The fight would have ended there if not for a sudden shift. He surprises even himself by blocking it, just in time with his own sword. The strange part is, even he knows he shouldn't have made it in time, so he wonders again if that lunatic weakened the strike on purpose. But that's not the only odd thing, because something else feels wrong. Up in the stands, Gray notices something strange moving inside Rada's chest, and he wonders what the hell that power is. Meanwhile, the teachers say the battle is far too one-sided, and some even mock him, because just like the protagonist knows, Rada could have finished this a long time ago. Still, several of them admit that even if he isn't winning, the protagonist is holding out surprisingly well. For them, that alone proves he's strong. But that stops mattering when Ariel asks them to end the test right away, because she has a bad feeling. Things are about to get ugly. Of course, the others insist the security system is flawless and will block any attack that threatens either fighter's life, and they take Ariel's warning as proof she's scared of losing. Even so, she yells that it won't be enough to protect Gray from what's coming. But by then it's already too late, because in just seconds, that strange energy building up inside Rada's chest erupts so hard that one swing of his sword tears through the arena floor and even the so-called barrier. It nearly hits Bruta too, and now she's finally ready to listen to Ariel. The woman realizes something wild, dangerous, and dark must have been planted inside the boy. Sadly, when she tries to use her power to step in, she gets pushed back by that same barrier, which means that if they want to save the protagonist, they'll have to turn it off. The problem is that takes time, so Ariel shouts for Gray to run and buy them some. Not a bad idea, except Gray knows that if he turns his back on that thing, he'll die instantly. Because of that, the one thing he still has is a chance to pull this off. Without wasting a second, the man gives him advice. He has to think of his own body as if it were the sword. It's a pretty abstract idea, and at first it confuses him, but once he starts picturing himself as the blade, that's when it clicks, because another one of Radha's powerful attacks comes at him. Only this time, he dodges it, instantly appearing behind his enemy. Not only that, he's moving so fast that for a moment he actually wonders if the madman got slower, until he realizes the one who changed is him. That gives him the confidence to keep going, and he nearly drives his strike through part of Radha's face. I say nearly because the barrier is still active, which means a small force field forms around Radha to block the cut, but not the impact, and all that stored energy blasts him away at insane speed until he slams into one of the arena walls. And pay attention. He goes straight through the barrier, which shocks the teachers so much they start asking what kind of fight this even is. Without wasting time, they order the medical team to get ready and treat Radha's injuries. That should have been the end of it, except he stands back up, now completely overtaken by that demonic energy, and if that wasn't enough, he's totally unharmed. So Ariel warns the protagonist the fight isn't over, and he manages to raise his guard just in time to see what's coming. That energy building up into the shape of tentacles, rushing at him and attacking from every possible angle. It's so insane that even Bruta blurts out, "What the hell is that?" Ariel pressures the tech team and they tell her the barrier will shut off in 10 seconds. That doesn't sound like much, but inside this nightmare, every second matters, especially when Radha closes the distance again, attacking with such force, speed, and bloodlust that the protagonist finally understands this thing isn't human anymore. Then again, he's not exactly normal either, so even though he fights back with everything he has, he still refuses to kill him. That choice costs him badly, because the enemy's next strike lands and he starts coughing up blood. Worst of all, that confirms that if he doesn't activate his ability, he'll die anyway. So he decides to bet everything and releases his power, cutting down his enemy in the blink of an eye. Thanks to that, Radha finally falls. Everyone in the academy watches it happen from the stands, stunned into silence, not knowing what to say until the barrier drops, and the teachers move at once. The teachers combine their restraint spells to pin Radha down. At the same time, Gray forces himself to gather what little strength he has left and tries to stand. But Ariel's warning was right. His body gives out and he crashes to the ground, torn up. The redhead rushes to hold his wounds together with healing magic, and the others waste no time joining in. They all help stabilize him, and then Gray blacks out. He stays unconscious for about 10 seconds. Then in the next moment, he gets back up like nothing happened. His wounds are already closed. He feels fine, and nothing hurts. To make sure, Ariel checks him with her special sight. What she finds shocks her. Somehow his soul doesn't have a single new scratch, even after using that power. As for his body, the healing magic took care of it, but Hector is the only one who isn't that surprised. He explains that what they did was lessen the backlash. His training was all about hardening Gray's mind and body, so that when he used such a destructive power, he could endure it. Even so, Ariel is upset that he put her student in danger, and the two argue for a bit while Gray can only think that at least that hellish training paid off. As for Radha, they rush him out of the arena so his injuries can be treated. Ariel of course can't resist asking who officially won. This one is harder to judge than the last fight, but Hector points out that Radha's inner barrier activated when Gray's strike nearly sliced his face. That means Gray won. So Gray, the first-year representative, is declared the victor, and the crowd instantly bursts into cheers. Hector takes the chance to remind the school leaders that Gray just ended a 35-year losing streak. For him, that should be more than enough proof that Ariel's divine eye doesn't make mistakes. Right away, Alexander says only an idiot would still support getting rid of the special class after what just happened. One of the professors goes even further, saying they should be ashamed for nearly throwing out a student this talented. Ariel says nothing. All she can think is, "Thank you." Meanwhile, the teachers turn to Bruta and ask if he still feels like questioning Ariel and her divine eye. Of course, he and the people who backed him up turn out to be total cowards. They literally run off with their tails between their legs. That makes it pretty clear the whole matter is officially over. One man even comments that people used to say it was foolish to pick a fight with the divine eye, and clearly everyone forgot that. There's still a long road ahead, but what happened today has changed everything. And that comment about Ariel's past, about how she used to be respected far more than she is now, fills Gray with questions. He starts wondering what happened to make things end up like this. Either way, his thoughts are cut off when the headmaster walks over and in a serious tone says they need to talk. What Radha did was only possible because of a strange power lodged inside his body, and the academy will investigate it and make sure whoever is responsible pays. Still, they can't ignore that the academy failed to detect the problem that nearly got Gray killed, so the headmaster apologizes. Gray tells him not to worry about it, so the headmaster moves on to the second issue. After Radha lost control, Gray also unleashed something no one there had ever seen. It wasn't magic, it was something far stranger, a kind of power that modern magic theory can't even begin to explain. That's exactly why he asks Gray to explain what that power really is. Gray quickly thinks about how much he should reveal and decides to be honest, but keep it simple. So he says he doesn't really know. Of course, to make that story work, he has to lie a little, claiming he didn't even realize he had that power until Ariel noticed it and explained the potential sleeping inside him. From a distance, the redhead hears all that and wonders what game he's playing. Gray shoots her a quick look, asking her to go along with it because if they want to stop the liquidator, she needs to stay the one in charge. Ariel understands what he means right away and steps into the conversation to back him up. She explains that even if Gray's power can't be understood through magic theory, she can still see it with her eyes, and that's why Hector put him through brutal training so he could control it. She's also been investigating it herself, which is why she wants all matters related to Gray's power left in her hands. Alexander agrees, since the Divine Eye students are technically her responsibility. He does offer to help however he can, and then they turn to something more urgent, Rada, who needs to be examined while he's treated in the infirmary. So Ariel goes with them. Later she meets up with Gray and tells him the power they found inside Rada was almost identical to the liquidators. In other words, Bradley must have used the same crystals they found before, and even worse, Rada wasn't actually beaten by Gray's attack. That power activated at that moment, and he completely lost control of his mind and body. The important part is that Ariel isn't stupid. She also figures out that Rada being there wasn't a coincidence. Someone sent him to kill Gray, almost like payback for taking down Bradley. And if Rada was manipulated after that professor died, then Bradley really wasn't behind it. It had to be a third party. Someone with access to student records and one of the big names connected to the man's shady research. For now, all they can do is keep digging. But Ariel's gut tells her the one responsible has to be a high-ranking member of the academy. So they need to be careful. For the moment, she congratulates him for learning how to use his power without damaging his soul. Then she reveals that Hector has decided it's time to move on to the next stage of his training, which will let him take his ability even further. In the next scene, Gray stands in the middle of the training field, surrounded by hundreds of armored dummies. From a distance, Hector and a group of specialists warn him that this method is dangerous and incredibly painful, so he has to clearly say he agrees to everything that's about to happen. They also remind him there are safer options, just much slower ones, but Gray says he's willing to take the risk and the training begins. Gray closes his eyes and focuses on what he did last time, trying to move his body as if it were part of the sword itself. Because of that, the dark energy slowly starts flowing through him, wrapping around both the blade and his body. Then he opens his eyes again and says, "Here I come," and a second later he starts tearing through the dummies. His movements are so smooth it looks like his arm is moving with the wind itself. The problem is, no matter how amazing it looks, there's still a limit, and before he can finish destroying every target, his body gives out. Luckily, that's why all the experts are there around him. They take turns using healing magic to force his body back on its feet within minutes. Gray thanks them and Hector praises him too. Every time he tries, he can hold that power a little longer. If this keeps up, one day he'll be able to fight full battles without his body breaking down afterward. Before, he was always so focused on surviving that he never really noticed it. But Gray finally says using that power makes every inch of him hurt. Hector insists that's actually a good sign. It's proof Gray is pushing past his limits. Still, he says that if Gray wants to stop or take things slower, he only has to ask. Gray refuses. He's ready to do it one more time. But right then, Ariel cuts in. She reminds them they can only use this brutal method once a day, because the nerves in his body need more time to recover, even after healing magic. If he pushes past that limit, he could lose the ability to properly use his sword. For the first time in a while, Hector agrees, and the three keep talking until one of the healers asks why Gray is so obsessed with getting stronger. Ariel answers that the people working with Bradley are now after his life, so he has to be ready for the worst. Everything that happened with Rada was only the beginning, and Bloodbrinker possibly being involved makes things even worse. Getting stronger is the only way he can survive. Once again, Ariel apologizes for dragging him into all this, but Gray tells her stopping the Liquidator's experiment was his own choice, so he's ready for whatever comes next. Luckily, Ariel says she knows a much simpler way that always helps swordsmen grow stronger: change the sword. Even if the Academy issued one is top class, it's obvious it won't be able to handle his power for long. In fact, with all the potential he still hasn't unlocked, she doubts there's any weapon strong enough, but they have to try, so she says she'll take him to her vault to choose one. Right away, Hector says she might be going a bit too far. Gray isn't ready yet. Ariel ignores him and suddenly a door opens out of nowhere. She insists he's earned this, and that's how they end up stepping through a portal that takes them straight into a massive treasure room. Every corner is packed with gold, jewels, and even strange potions. The place is so huge that even Ariel doesn't quite remember how to get to the sword section. But they finally make it, and she tells Gray their goal is to find a sword that perfectly matches his power. Hector says this is the biggest sword collection in the world, and there are so many blades that it's hard to know where to start. Ariel picks the safest plan: test one sword a day at full power, since his ability only gives them one real try daily. So first, they narrow the list down to the most promising ones. To start, Ariel shows him the sharpest sword there, a huge claymore. Gray gives it a try by swinging it through a giant wooden log. What shocks them is that he doesn't even need to use his ability or much strength to split it clean in half. The blow even cracks the floor. The sword is amazing, but it's too heavy for the way Gray usually fights. Hector points out that a sword means nothing if he can barely move it. Still, against huge, tough, slow enemies like divine beasts, it would be perfect. so Ariel tells him to keep it anyway. She'll even give him a magic storage bag so he can carry it around without dragging it everywhere. At first, Gray refuses. He doesn't think he deserves to be handed a sword like that for free, but Ariel pushes back. Better he uses it than let it sit there collecting dust. Besides, they have no idea what kind of enemies he'll face now that Bradley's mastermind has noticed him. If he were truly sure he'd never use it, she wouldn't insist. But if there's even a small chance he might need it, then he has to take it. That makes Gray think back to everything he went through in the war, how nothing ever felt like enough. That's why he finally accepts it, and thanks her. Hector then warns him not to show it off unless he has to, because its market value is 10,000 gold coins. Gray nearly has a heart attack and tries to hand it back, but Ariel refuses to take returns. In fact, she's not lending it to him. She's giving it to him because she wants him to fight without holding back. She tells him to forget the money, and if that still bothers him, he can think of it as a reward for everything he's done for her. Gray tries to refuse again, but the redhead shuts him up, and this time the idiot thanks her properly. But that's only the beginning. Now they need something more normal, something he can use in regular fights against humans. As they search, Gray admits he never imagined her personal treasure room would be this incredible, and Hector says this is only the start. Her divine eye doesn't just show abilities, it also reveals the value of things in business chances no one else can see. In simple terms, that eye could make her as rich as she wants. Ariel tells them to stop chatting, and says that as the sword instructor, Hector should pick the next one. So he chooses the next blade. After looking around, Hector points to a simple sword so light that Gray can move with ridiculous speed. The problem is it also feels too average, and something about it seems off. For a second, Gray wonders if he's just imagining it, but Hector notices it too, saying it just doesn't seem like the right fit. So they move on to the next one that caught his eye, a sword with bright blue details. It grabs Gray's attention right away. He's so impressed that the first thing he blurts out is asking what it is. But that's only the start. When he tries to lift it, he finds out it's light as a feather. Even stranger, he runs a finger along the blade and doesn't get cut because it has no edge at all. It was made to test new technology, not for real combat. That makes it dull but insanely durable. A mix that might actually be perfect for him. Why? Because with his ability, sharpness barely matters. What he needs is a sword that can survive his power no matter how strong he becomes. For now, other swords can still work, but sooner or later, they'll only hold him back. So Ariel thinks the key to pushing his potential even higher is getting used to fighting without depending on a blade's edge. That's why a sword like this could let him grow without limits, and she proves it by smashing a test block with all her strength. The sword can't cut through it, but the force still goes straight into the target and nearly destroys it anyway. Ariel still isn't fully sure it'll work, but she admits it's worth trying. She says he can check out any weapon he wants, even ones that aren't technically swords. For a moment, that really hooks Gray, because honestly, he could spend all day studying the weapons there. One emerald-colored blade quickly catches his eye, and he's about to grab it when something changes. His body stops on pure instinct, then starts walking toward another sword he hadn't noticed before. A long, slim blade that feels strangely familiar. Curious, he asks Ariel what she knows about it, and she explains that a former student left it there after graduating. It isn't famous, but it's very well made, and she's absolutely right, because when Gray tests it, he finds it easy to hold and it fits his hand perfectly. Then comes the best part. With his first swing, it slices through a test block like butter, matching his movements with a scary kind of flow. Even Hector and Ariel notice it. It's like he's trained with that sword since birth, like it was made just for him. Seeing the excitement on his face, Ariel adds it to the list of swords they'll test, since they still need to see whether it can handle his power. Gray couldn't agree more, but he feels bad about the idea of ruining someone else's sword. Once again, Ariel tells him that's the last thing he should worry about. Then everything changes when she reveals that the former owner's name was Medalum Norum, someone who's a nobody right now, but will one day become the greatest maker of magic swords in the world. A few days pass, and then they decide it's finally time to start testing the weapons. The plan is to push each one to its limit, so they can judge both power and durability, starting with the one with blue details. At first, it looks like it's going to respond perfectly, until Gray tries to activate his power and suddenly it feels like something cuts off. What's even weirder is that it keeps happening again and again, no matter how hard he focuses. It's so strange that Ariel asks whether he feels any difference in his body, but since he feels fine, the only answer is that the sword itself is causing it. So they set it aside for now and move straight to the last blade he found, the supposedly ordinary sword that might actually be the perfect weapon. Once again, the prota begins the routine he's been sharpening over the last few days. He tells himself that he will become one with the sword, and then releases a shocking amount of energy. This time, the good news is that he not only activates it, the power actually holds. Everything seems fine until he hears a voice whisper in his ear. While there's still time, he turns at once thinking he imagined it, but the voice keeps going, and it's coming from the sword itself. From farther away, Hector and Ariel don't notice anything strange, so the test continues as Gray tries to wipe out as many training dummies as possible. He notices that the power is the same as before, but the sword helps him control it in an incredibly smooth way. On top of that, his whole body feels unbelievably light, letting him keep going and going at a speed that even shocks the healers nearby. But they notice something else too. He isn't just fast, it feels like he's flying through battle. The biggest surprise comes seconds later, when Gray turns to strike the next target and realizes there aren't any left. Before, he could only take out half of them before passing out, but now he's destroyed all of them in record time. Even so, Ariel and the others watch him with worried faces and ask how the hell he's still standing. They don't just mean the strain of the energy, his chest is split open from end to end, like something stabbed straight through him with a sword. Panicking, the redhead screams for him to drop the blade, and he obeys, shocked when the pain in his chest hits him the moment he lets go. The healers rush in and cover him with layer after layer of healing magic, but even after that he's still shaking and can barely stand. Ariel explains that not even magic can erase the effects of losing that much blood. She tells him to sit down for a while. He just pushed past limits his body had never even reached before. In one way, that's a good sign, but moving around without realizing how bad his condition is could get him killed. He'll probably need an experienced healer at his side in the future. That kind of reckless fighting is way too dangerous. For now, the important thing is that the sword is completely intact. No marks, no scratches, nothing. When Ariel tries to study it with her magic eye, she even notices the blade shining brighter, like it enjoyed the fight. Sadly, that becomes less important almost right away, because in its reflection she catches a strange movement near the Academy's main towers, and when she looks up, those same towers explode into thousands of pieces. Then the rubble starts falling toward them, and panic spreads through the students. At the same time, the teachers join forces and raise a barrier big enough to protect everyone. Of course, even the protagonist never saw this coming. Hector explains that Area holds the vault for dangerous materials, so someone must have caused the blast. Worst of all, he picked up a faint trace of teleportation magic. That can only mean the explosion was part of a plan to steal something from inside the vault. The problem is, that whole place was specially built to block that kind of magic. But Ariel also sensed liquidator energy mixed into the smoke, so they likely used crystals made in the underground lab to blow open the wall and disable the anti-teleport field. In short, the people behind the explosion were allies of Bradley, allies so confident in their power that they directly attacked the Academy headquarters. A few days later, Ariel finally confirms to the protagonist that the investigation really does show it was a theft. She wasn't told much, of course, but since the culprits destroyed the teleport inhibitor and escaped like it was nothing, she's completely sure it was an inside job. And with that, it becomes even clearer that the Academy is no longer an organization they can trust without question. Deep down, she even thinks maybe it never was. Still, the protagonist sees it a different way. If the enemy really controls the Academy, they should be able to take whatever they want from the vaults without making a scene. So the only reason for all that trouble is that they had no legal way to get whatever they stole. The whole thing is so strange that Ariel still clings to the idea that the Blue Drinker are behind it, and this open display of force is something she takes as a warning. They're in danger, and Gray is in danger too. He has to stay extremely careful, not just inside the Academy, but outside it too. That leaves the protagonist with a really bad feeling. And he's not the only one, because when he goes to the next class, he notices everyone is seriously on edge. Naturally, he thinks it's because of the explosion, but he's way off. They're actually terrified about the outdoor marching exercise they were called to join. Seeing him so calm, Leonhardt figures maybe he didn't have time to read the notice, but the protagonist tells him there's no way he missed it, since they'll spend a full week stuck in a forest packed with high-level monsters. It's such a harsh place that just moving between camps will take 16 straight hours, and there's not even any promise they'll be able to sleep at night with creatures stalking them the whole time. Even so, he stays totally calm, while everyone else panics because more than half the students quit in their first year because of this test. What they don't know is that the protagonist has survived something even worse. In his earlier training, they threw them into forests even more dangerous, with no supervision and no help. Just them and hundreds of monsters that wiped most of them out. That obviously impresses Leonhardt, who's basically started acting like his personal fan. Still, seeing everyone so nervous also makes Gray realize maybe he's taking this too lightly and needs to pay more attention to what could happen. And just like that, we move straight to the day of the exercise, where Hector warns them that finishing this test is one of the key factors for advancing to second year. Gray notices they're right at the edge of the Wintel continent, a wild place with no inhabitants, even if it looks beautiful at first glance. For a moment, he wonders if there's a specific reason for that, but it's obvious he'll get the answer soon enough. That's because Hector, one of the people in charge of supervising them, decides to lead them through an alternate route deep in the forest. So the hours pass with everyone walking through endless trees. The worst part comes when they ask how much farther it is, and it turns out they've only made it halfway. The teachers try to encourage them, saying they'll get used to it little by little. Some students notice that Leonhardt doesn't even look tired, but the blonde guy is even more impressed by the protagonist's stamina. He hasn't slowed down even once in the 8 hours they've been walking. Still, the most shocking moment comes when a girl is about to get attacked by a giant spider. He wastes no time, and with one quick motion throws a dagger that kills it instantly. So it's not just that he can keep up the pace, he's fully focused on everything happening around him. There isn't a single opening in his stance, and that shows how prepared he is. As for Gray, he still thinks this is nothing compared to the hell he already survived. What worries him isn't the monsters, it's how exposed they are, and the fact that the Academy knows exactly where they are. Basically, it's the perfect setup for any infiltrator to attack. Eventually, the teachers tell them it's time to stop, not because they've reached their destination, but because from this point on they'll be doing a new training exercise involving food. Of course, nobody knows what that means, and the students look at each other in confusion before suddenly cheering. They've come to the best possible conclusion: it must be time for a feast. Gray isn't so sure though. If they were just going to feed them, they'd say it plainly. Calling it training means the exact opposite. His doubts are confirmed when one of the teachers explains that on trips like this, the students are the ones who cook. It's called training because it's part of the test, and basically they'll have to split into teams, take the needed tools, and prepare their own meal. The teacher immediately summons the supplies, and then the protagonist is named leader of Squad D, with 3 others, Basque, Rumia, and Venice. That makes him pretty nervous because he assumes the others still don't take him seriously, but it turns out to be the complete opposite. The 3 walk up to him kindly, and none of them even think of saying something stupid like they won't listen to someone who didn't take the regular exam. In fact, the protagonist is the one who asks if they're okay with him being the leader, and they say of course. After what he showed the other day, it's obvious he's one of the most capable first years. So they focus on the mission, while Gray thinks this is exactly what he's worked so hard for. Then things get weird when they open the box and realize the supply crate doesn't really have supplies at all. It comes with a pot, a lighter, and that's it. They think it's a mistake until the teacher explains that in a real battle, you usually won't have food or cooking tools, so they should be grateful they even got a pot. In other words, they're on their own this time. Leonhardt tries to point out that modern missions use magical storage with everything needed to survive, but the teacher says that only applies to missions planned ahead of time. In an emergency battle, or if the supply officer dies, they'll have to manage by themselves, because the other option is dying helplessly without being able to do anything. Besides, magic storage bags are extremely expensive, so this training isn't pointless, and today they'll do it the old-fashioned way. Leonhardt apologizes, and Gray starts to appreciate the magic bag Ariel gave him for the sword a little more. The point is, they have to head straight into the forest to find their own supplies. The good news is that it won't be too hard now because until this point the teachers have been using a special spell to keep monsters away, but they drop it right now so the food will come straight to them. Of course, to eat them, they'll first have to beat them. And just like that, with a small snap, the little feeling of safety around them disappears and is replaced by the unease of knowing more than one monster is watching them with killing intent. Nervous, the students ask the protagonist what they should do, and he says it's pretty simple: hunt the monsters and eat them. The good part is that he's been studying the trail very carefully, and from the tracks most of the creatures seem medium or small, so their swords should be enough. As for the hunting plan, it's not that complicated, because since the creatures are carnivores, they'll come to them on their own. They just need to react in time and fight. In short, they have to act like bait, and the key is moving fast, because if they stay there, they'll end up competing with the other squads for prey. They could also eat insects, but while the others want to hunt something better, his sharp judgment guides them to a more remote part of the forest, where they follow a set of tracks until he realizes what's coming. They found the perfect prey. Of course, none of them expected it to be this huge. It's a giant bear-like monster charging at them, ready to tear them apart. Naturally, the protagonist already expected something like this, but the others didn't, and they freeze instantly, since it's also the first time they've seen a real monster this close. Worse yet, the creature is much faster than they expected. Even so, they still manage to dodge it just in time, and their bodies react almost instinctively to each attack. The pink-haired boy thinks this is exactly what he's trained for all this time, and after dodging another huge strike, it's his turn. He drives his sword into part of the monster's neck. Or at least that's how it seems, because right when he thinks he has it cornered, the bear swings one of its paws at him. He doesn't notice until it's only inches from his face, but luckily the protagonist reacts in time, and with one quick move tears the whole paw off. That triggers a wild, violent reaction from the creature, and with the protagonist fallen on his back beside it, the beast lashes out with an attack that would have been brutal if not for the fact that Gray already knew it would react like that. And in a matter of seconds, he cuts off its head. From a distance, all of this is seen by his teammates, who can't believe he pulled it off so easily. Then the protagonist quickly helps the pink-haired boy back up, and of course he thanks him for it. Gray warns them not to relax. Even a dying monster can still move after a fatal hit. So instead of focusing only on killing them, everyone needs to focus on staying alive. These aren't people, they're beasts that fight to the bitter end. After that, they dig into the bear meat, and it tastes way better than anyone expected. The protagonist explains that monster meat changes a lot by species. Some can be eaten, but others are straight up poisonous. So he says they should always check the local species list before a mission. Surprised, Rumia asks if he trained in survival skills, and Gray says he knows a few things, but he's no expert. Their talk keeps going until another squad shows up. They clearly had a much harder time finding prey, so they ask if they can have some food. After checking with the others, the protagonist agrees. The problem is, before they can hand over anything, the professor suddenly appears and warns them that sharing food between squads is forbidden, then takes the unlucky group away. Not long after, all the teams gather again to start another 16-hour march to the next destination. This time the exhaustion is obvious because unlike the protagonist team, the others barely had time to recover, and the professor announces they'll camp here. The good news is that now they'll finally get portable rations and personal tents to rest comfortably. The bad news, there will be a surprise attack drill during the night, so each squad has to come up with its own way to defend the camp. They can use any method they think works, and while some idiots instantly think about sleeping and using the other squads as an alarm system to know when the attack starts, the professor already planned for that and says every team will be placed in completely separate areas so nobody can take advantage or cheat. With that, they begin the second training exercise, and once again they set up their camp. Then they figure the safest plan would be to have 2 people on watch at once, but that would leave them with less time to sleep, so they settle on 1 person standing guard and rotating through the night. As for the order, it's a whole long thing, but the point is that the protagonist ends up second, while Bask, the pink-haired guy from before, takes third, and everything seems fine until they go to sleep, and Rumia starts the first shift, thinking it would be the easiest one. Then, to her surprise, right at that moment, a figure with a knife starts moving closer. The problem is she's already fighting sleep, so she notices nothing until the intruder steps on a twig, and the protagonist is the one who jolts awake with a bad feeling. No animal would move that carefully, so the enemy has to be human. Because of that, he peeks through a gap in the tent, and seeing that Rumia still hasn't reacted, he becomes even more sure that someone is out there. Right away, he remembers the warning Ariel gave him the last time they met. The people behind Bradley are after him. Even if this is probably just the planned surprise attack drill, he still has to be ready in case it's really an assassin. That's why he quietly slips out of the tent and starts checking the area around them, using the moonlight to see clearly. He follows the signs, and that brings back strong memories of the time he was personally trained by Jacob, the divine archer. Jacob taught him how to move without making noise or being noticed, stressing that the real issue wasn't sound itself, it was making sounds that felt too human. The goal was to blend in with the sounds of nature, to become part of the surroundings. Thanks to that, Gray can move in without being noticed, until he catches the intruder red-handed, and before the person can react, Gray puts a knife to his neck and warns him not to move if he wants to leave alive. First, he has to answer every question, and if he makes one useless move, Gray will kill him. He immediately demands his name and affiliation. Then comes the shock when the man turns around. It's the professor, sneaking around the camp as part of the surprise attack exercise. Of course, he never expected one of his own students to jump him like that, catch him completely off guard, and threaten him with such clear skill, control, and awareness in the open. Honestly, it makes sense. Still, the protagonist is so paranoid that he can't help wondering if this could still be an assassin pretending to be the professor, even though he admits that if someone really wanted him dead, they'd bring something stronger than a simple knife. So he takes a few seconds before finally backing off, but right then, Rumia interrupts them. She apparently came out to check the area, and she's shocked to find both of them together like that. They explain what happened, and the professor admits it's the first time he's seen first-year students this prepared, so prepared. In fact, that he assumes they had 2 people watching at the same time. That catches the protagonist's attention, so he explains he only came out because he heard a sound and asks if it was the professor who stepped on a twig nearby. Luckily, it was. The professor never imagined they'd detect the attack from something that small. Gray just says he's a light sleeper, and that makes the man laugh because he's been watching him, and ever since he entered the academy, Gray hasn't stopped surprising him so much that he starts to wonder whether there's really anything left for him to teach. Then he decides that from now on, Gray will be banned from night watch training because if he handles everything himself, his teammates won't get the chance to learn. Worried, the protagonist asks if that wouldn't leave the others with even fewer hours of sleep. So the professor offers a fix. He won't attack during the hours when Gray would have been on guard. That way the rest can sleep and still prove themselves on their own. On top of that, because he did so well, the professor automatically gives the protagonist a perfect 10 for that part of the test. And with that, the matter seems settled. Or at least that's how it looks. Because as the professor walks away, he can't stop wondering whether the protagonist went through some kind of special training, what exactly he might be hiding, and who he really is. With all those questions hanging in the air, we move to the next day, when he gathers the students again to continue the march, and the strain from lost sleep, plus the wear from not resting properly, starts showing even more. Even so, the students push through and keep walking until sunset. When the professor says they've reached the next camp, the thing is, they're so worn out and traumatized that they're scared to hear what the next test will be until he tells them to relax, because today's training is over. They don't have to do anything else, and he doesn't even expect them to set up the tents because he already handled that so they can rest comfortably until the food is ready. Yes, food, because while everyone sleeps peacefully, the teachers prepare a full feast for them. The only one still uneasy is the protagonist, who thinks this can only mean one thing: tomorrow is going to be hell. Beside him, Leonhardt says that no matter what happens, he's sure Gray will be fine, and they keep talking until the professor announces they can come out. The moment they do, they're welcomed by a table packed with delicious food, along with the confirmation that they can eat as much as they want. He even praises them for all their hard work over the last few days. But the look on his face makes it obvious this is too good to be true. And that gets confirmed the next day, when he and the other teachers explain that they're about to begin the most dangerous part of the training, where they'll have to cross the dangerous zone of the Gastia mountain range. It's a harsh place, but things still go fairly well at first because they've recovered, have their energy back, and are moving at a fairly calm pace. Once again, everything feels fine until they're warned to get ready, because in 2 kilometers they'll enter the habitat of the water lizard, a monster far stronger than anything they've faced so far, one that can kill a person in seconds. That's why they're told to move slowly and not draw attention, since any noise could mean death. Even though these creatures usually seem calm, they're still bloodthirsty. Again, Gray thinks the situation reminds him of the training he had with Jacob, so he starts moving exactly the way Jacob taught him, a method the professor instantly recognizes as something only a skilled monster hunter would do. Meanwhile, the other students move so badly it's almost ridiculous, so the professor yells at them to hurry up. The protagonist thinks that's reckless, since they're still beginners in an extremely dangerous area. Even so, they keep moving until they reach the most critical part of the territory. There, he tells them that from that point on, talking is forbidden. Strangely, everything feels so peaceful that many of them let their guard down. One guy even starts thinking all those warnings about the water lizard must have been fake because there's no way they'd bring a bunch of inexperienced students into a place where they could die at any second. And of course, that becomes his biggest mistake because he loses focus and trips, hitting the ground right away. For a moment, the idiot thinks that's all that'll happen. He'll lose a few points and keep going at the academy. But he couldn't be more wrong, because within seconds they find themselves completely surrounded by the creatures, and the next thing we get is a full rush straight at them, all hunger and bloodlust. One of them is about to rip that student apart with its claws when Hector steps in and stops it, driving his sword through its head. The strike is so strong it cracks the ground, but sadly that only marks the start of the nightmare, because the second he pulls out his sword, another beast leaps at them at full speed, forcing Leonhardt to jump in with a clean, confident strike that would have been enough to kill it if the monster's hide weren't so thick that it deflects the blade. Its scales block the blade like armor, and in the end the lizard comes out without a single scratch. By then it's already right on top of them. That leaves the blonde at a huge disadvantage. Luckily, Hector steps in again and yells that this isn't something the students can fight. He orders them to fall back while he and the other teachers handle the monsters. It sounds fine, except even the teachers struggle to deal any deep damage, and the shocking part is that even though they can only land a few cuts, they still manage to bring them down. Then the mustache professor explains that during summer, water lizards carry very little water in their bodies, so even a small loss of blood can kill them. One of the boys asks if they could have beaten them during the rainy season, and the mustache man says no, they'd all be dead if that were the case. That's exactly why all this training is done at this time of year. After that, they keep moving until they finally reach the summit, and Hector congratulates them. Even with that setback, they made it. Leonhardt says the hardest part wasn't the brutal path itself, but the stress of crossing it without making even the tiniest sound. And that's the whole point of the training, which becomes obvious when they look at Gray. He's calmer than ever since war already trained him for situations like this. Even so, Hector says they're doing far better than past rookie classes. Before they move on, he asks if anyone has questions because once they keep going, they'll enter enemy territory again and won't be able to talk. The thing is, Gray doesn't have a question. He has a warning. In the distance, he spots a dark cloud rushing toward them, and with the wind blowing that way, it's easy to guess what's coming next. Of course, Hector takes it seriously and asks the mustached man if rain is even possible at this time of year. The man says it should be impossible, but now that Gray pointed it out, he can see the cloud too, which means trouble. With that in mind, Hector decides they need to turn back and cancel the training. The top priority is getting out of water lizard territory as fast as possible. But surprisingly, the mustached man disagrees. He insists the cloud is too small to panic over, so they should keep going. Hector argues that even one cloud at this time of year is already strange, but the mustached teacher, whose name is Wormill, is backed by the other professors. They point out that he's led this training for years, so they should trust his judgment. Wormill adds that if Hector is that worried, they can just move faster, telling the students to run like their lives depend on it. Still, there won't be time to fight any monsters, so they have to be even quieter. The problem is, just like Hector feared, less than 10 minutes pass before it starts pouring rain, something completely unnatural for this season. It's so strange that he starts wondering if the rain is being caused by someone, and as if that wasn't enough, Wormill starts talking out loud about how shocked he is, even though everyone knows they can't make noise. So Gray walks over and tells him to be quiet, but the idiot keeps talking until the obvious finally happens. A water lizard appears behind him, ready to kill. Worst of all, just like they were warned, this one moves much faster than before, and Wormill barely manages to dodge it. Still, he does avoid the hit and draws his sword just in time to strike back, piercing the creature's arm and making it spill plenty of blood. But it doesn't fall. Instead, it turns even more savage, glaring at him like he made a huge mistake. A second later, the beast counters, snapping its tail like a whip. But even though Wormill stabs it again, it still isn't enough. The force of the blow sends him flying across the forest, and he slams straight into a giant rock. Several seconds pass before he manages to stand, shaking from the effort. Of course, the students can hardly believe one of their teachers is getting beaten that easily. Even Gray thinks his reflexes should be fast enough to dodge that, which can only mean this lizard is far stronger than any they've faced before. By now, it's obvious every warning about the water lizards and the rain was true, so the remaining teachers quickly form a special formation meant to pin it down in a 4-on-1 fight, where in theory they should have the advantage. The problem is that even though each of them lands careful strikes on key parts of its body, the creature keeps fighting like nothing happened. Then it breaks through Wormill's guard again, knocking him to the ground completely helpless, and this time the monster is faster. Without wasting a second, it jumps at him to finish him off, but it's stopped by Hector's sword, which slices through its neck in one clean hit before it's too late. Things are so bad that even they seem surprised they actually managed to kill it. Hector warns that this is no time to relax because not even the teachers are strong enough to come out of this unharmed. The mustache man agrees and tells one of the female teachers to cast an emergency teleport spell so they can get out before it's too late. The problem is, she says she's been trying for a while, but for some reason it won't work. When the others try, they get the same result. It's clear something or someone is blocking their teleport magic on purpose. And combined with the fact that rain started when that should be impossible, it can only mean whoever is behind this is targeting them more. Specifically this whole expedition. Wormhole starts to panic and asks what they should do. Another teacher says trying to cross the zone in this rain is certain death, so maybe they should make camp and wait for the storm to end. That sounds reasonable, except if the rain is artificial, there's a good chance it won't stop until they're all dead. That starts a long argument, because both options have their own pros and cons. They really seem trapped. Then Gray tells them that as long as there's healing magic, he can fight, because with his ability their odds of surviving go up. Hector admits he has a point, but neither of them can promise Gray will last until they reach the exit. Still, staying there means dying, so even with the risk of pushing his powers too hard, Gray insists this is the perfect chance to train and push past his limits in a real life or death situation. It's also the only plan they have, and when Hector tries to refuse, Gray corners him by asking if he really values his own life more than the dozens of students who could die there if they do nothing. That instantly reminds Hector that Ariel had already warned him about Gray's habit of wanting to sacrifice himself every chance he gets, and he also remembers the desperate look on her face when she asked him to protect the boy. Even so, he has no choice but to accept, asking him to. But right then, they get cut off by Wormhole, who insists it's insane to trust so many lives to a single student. Hector says they haven't seen everything Gray can do, and since they don't have many options, he suggests they take the risk together and trust in Gray's power. Some of them seem to consider it, but Wormhole doesn't budge. As another option, he orders some of the teachers to use communication magic to send a rescue request to Academy headquarters, thinking it's safer to wait than try to escape with just one student. And even though communication is blocked too, the teacher he asked insists he managed to send the message. The problem is, instead of calming things down, Wormhole accuses Hector of being reckless and willing to put the students in danger, and the tension only keeps rising. Hector fires back that the monsters could attack again before any reinforcements arrive. Even so, it seems like everyone is siding with Wormhole, who ends the argument by saying they should stay put, so they fall silent and start waiting for a miracle. The problem is that with every passing second, the students grow more nervous, because for some reason the only one staying calm through all of this is Wormhole himself. He doesn't even react when he hears movement in the forest, a sign the lizards have finally come for them. The good thing is, Hector doesn't waste a second and takes a battle stance, while telling Gray not to step in unless things get really bad. Without hesitation, Gray agrees, and then the teachers begin round 2 against another one of the creatures, which manages to wound one teacher before Hector and Wormhole finish it with a joint strike straight to the chest. That small win makes them think they have things under control, but they're completely wrong. The noise of the fight draws in 2 more beasts, and Gray, Leonhardt, and some of the students quickly pull out their own swords. Hector stops them, saying not yet. The teachers still have plenty left, and the students should use this chance to see how an academy professor really fights. In seconds, everything changes, their eyes grow fiercer, and they switch back into that earlier formation to handle both enemies at once. Even Leonhardt is shocked to see they don't hesitate at all, but that doesn't change the fact that it's a brutal fight that forces them to focus on one enemy first before moving to the other. So Hector keeps one of the beasts busy, striking it again and again to open the perfect gap for Wormhole to drive his sword straight into its heart. The students cheer right away, but one is still left, and worse, feeling cornered, it starts roaring with all its strength, and Leonhardt notices the teachers They've barely been hurt, so Leonhardt figures they might really hold out until backup arrives, but that hope falls apart fast. Right in the middle of the fight with the second monster, 2 figures appear behind Hector and the other teachers, clearly going in for a kill. They close the distance fast, but before they can strike, Gray jumps in and slices off both their arms in one move. Even that isn't the biggest shock, because the attackers aren't strangers at all. They're Wormhole and the glasses-wearing teacher who had backed every one of his choices up to now. The teacher they almost hit turns and sees both men bleeding out on the ground, but he forces himself to stay focused on the creature. At the same time, Hector thanks the protagonist for protecting them. With that, they bring the monster down. Then the really important part starts when they confront those bastards and ask what the hell they were trying to do. Of course, Wormhole denies everything and claims he was only attacking the creature when Gray cut off his arm. The glasses teacher backs him up, shouting that Gray should be arrested, but another professor calls them pathetic because everyone there saw exactly where their attacks were aimed. The students confirm it too, looking at each other and realizing they all witnessed the same thing. Sadly, this isn't the first time something like this has happened at the academy. It has plenty of enemies after all. But it is the first time the attack came from the teachers themselves. And as for the reason, it's obvious those bastards planned to cover it up as an accident. It's still unclear whether they meant to kill the students or kidnap them for something worse. But one thing is certain, They're safe now because of the protagonist. That said, Gray tells Wormhole to stop pretending, because both he and Hector have suspected him for a long time. That shocks the bastard so much he nearly admits it, asking if their plan leaked somehow. But the protagonist answers honestly, nothing leaked. They figured it out from the way he acted. Every plan Wormhole pushed left the students exposed, and at first Gray thought he was just incompetent. But the truth became obvious when the rain started, and his movements turned unnatural. He suddenly took hits he could have easily dodged, not because he was weak, but because he was putting on a show to blend in with the people who were actually after cutting down everyone else in his area. He only wants one answer, the name of the special designation criminal in the hideout. The man says it's Meadow Bradley, the daughter of the teacher Gray killed some time ago. The criminal confirms there's no one else besides her, and once Bard has what he needs, he kills him immediately, thinking this is exactly what he expected. That's right, he already knew there was only one special criminal, and he split the team on purpose, not because it was the most efficient plan, but because the worst mistake in a group fight is dragging around dead weight. He separated them so each person would handle one section alone without worrying about helping a fallen teammate. Bard never wanted to risk his life protecting Gray or anyone else, and if one of them died, he saw it as acceptable collateral. So no, he isn't a traitor, he's just a selfish bastard who only cares about himself. And right now, the only thing he wants is for the special criminal to appear in Gray's area. Unfortunately for him, that plan blows up in his face, because at that exact moment, someone explodes the floor under him. He jumps back in time, and the one behind it is Midu, the exact person he wanted to avoid. Of course, she notices he doesn't seem very surprised to see her. That means everyone who knows she's here has to die. Bard quickly says he's already taken care of that. What he wants to know is why she's here, when all the map intel said she should be in the opposite sector. Midu tells him the maps were right, but they didn't account for the fact that she already expected a surprise attack, so she started moving around at random to ruin any enemy strategy. And the frustration on Bard's face proves it worked. She finds that hilarious. Bard does. Midu is a modified human created by Bradley himself, and she's said to be one of the strongest students in the magic course. So having him, the weakest student in the Grima class, face her feels like a cruel joke. Sadly, Midu can tell the same thing. He isn't that strong, so she decides to end the fight at once and fires a wave of pure dark energy that almost swallows him whole. That word almost matters, because Bard stays calm and swings his sword, sending out a wave of life force that cancels the spell as if it were magic. That shocks Manu, because she's never seen Grima at a level that works almost like real magic. Bard doesn't waste the opening and charges her, trying to close the distance. But Manu still has more tricks. She pulls out some kind of potion, spreads it across the ground, and a dark magenta fog fills the whole room. This time he can't cancel it with life force, and within seconds it wraps around him completely, then burns him alive. And just like that, Bard drops to the floor with his entire body burned. Madu thinks it's a shame she had to waste such a valuable material, but at least she can use the body of the victim to make more. Season finale. Chapter 52.